what the post-Janus world will look like, it's important to think about, what we're going to do and where we've come from. That's why I've asked my good friend Ted Kirsch to come sit down with us. Ted, thanks for taking time for us.
It's always a pleasure to have a conversation with you.
It's great seeing you. What do you think of this? What do you think of this event?
I think that the union movement has moved into the modern world. I mean, it's high tech, videos, interviews. It's not just speeches. They're limited. It's a step forward. I've been coming to these things for years, but this one is really top notch.
Now, there are a lot of issues that are front and center. Healthcare being one of them. Obviously, the Janus versus AFSCME case being another one. The humanitarian resolution for Puerto Rico. Lots of problems. What are you hoping comes out of this event?
I hope that there's action that takes place. I mean, the resolutions are all well and good, and there are good resolutions. But it has to be more than just a resolution, not just that group of people got together, they voted, they said, yeah, this is what we want. To me, what's really important is, what's the next step? How do we implement what we said we believe in? And how do we, and the key word is organize. How do we organize among our members and the general population to fulfill these goals that are contained in our resolutions?
Now, obviously, I'm sure one of the big issues for you is the Janus case, being one of the representatives from the American Federation of Teachers and a lifelong teacher and a lifelong labor leader. Does this change the dynamics of the teachers' unions? Does it change the dynamics of how you bargain? How's this going to affect you, do you think?
Well, I'm not so sure. I mean, I know it's going to go. It's going to pass the way the Supreme Court is made up today. But we're anticipating. So we're actually not just going to sit back and go, oh, woe is me.
Right.
We're out there organizing. We're actually talking to our people the importance of the union and why you need a union and why they want to get rid of the union for the same reason they joined us. So we're not just going to sit back and sit on our hands. Yeah. We're anticipating now, and we're putting together a program to do the best we can to hold on to our members.
Now, I've been asking the question: when do we admit that the New Deal era labor peace is over? When do we say labor peace is dead and we go back to the streets? And you're somebody who you came from that. I mean, you've seen what it's like to be on strike and long strikes. I think as a country we've forgotten that strike. We've forgotten that tension. We've forgotten that militancy.
Well, it's something of a different generation that we have. I think it depends where do we come from. And I recall as a kid growing up, my parents talking to me that I had to go to college. Not that I had to be a particular.
You just had to go to college.
You had to go to college.
Yeah.
When I did go to college, I graduated from Westchester University, which was then Westchester State Teachers College many years ago. It was a big celebration in the family. I was the first college graduate, not just of my immediate family, but the whole family. It was a different generation. And when I became a teacher, it was such a lofty position to be in. That people,
now you're evil.
Yeah, now, and suddenly, I don't know how it happened, that we're the enemy, we're the bad guys. And I still harken back to the fact that public education is so important. That if it wasn't for public education, I wouldn't have the life that I have today. And my kids and my grandkids, who all went through public schools, the opportunities they've had because of teachers. And now we've been demonized just because some people have a lot of money and they can buy TV space and organize to make us the enemy. Something's wrong in this country. Maybe we have to go back to those. I was watching a video the other day of the UAW strike in Flint, and I guess it was the 30s. Maybe we have to revisit some of this action and get the people in this country back on track to fulfill the goals of this great nation.
No, as someone who studies labor history, I don't want to romanticize how it was. It was bloody, it was violent, people died. But I think we as a working class today have forgotten, the 8-hour day wasn't something that was just given to us by a benevolent employer. Overtime wasn't just something that was given to us by a benevolent employer. You can go down the list: weekends, healthcare, pensions, go down the list of all of that. It wasn't just given, it was something that somebody fought, bled, and died for.
And now they're trying to take it away. And what is the logic of this? So we need to have a sit down with ourselves and have a discussion with ourselves about really what's happening.
Right. Does it, there's the old labor saying, sometimes the only time your head gets right is when your stomach's empty. Does it have to be, desperation that this comes back out of? Does the labor movement have to fall further before it rises back up? I'm curious your assessment.
I hope not.
I hope not either, because a lot of people are going to suffer.
But you know what? I think the labor movement now recognizes what's happening. It's not we're going to sit back, let it happen, and then go, oh, woe is me, what happened to us? We understand what's happening, who it is, and that's what I hope one of the goals of this convention, and that is to fight back.
Yeah, absolutely. And to get, one of the resolutions that were passed, getting more union members elected to political office, both at the state and local level and also at the federal level. Because look, where we're from in Pennsylvania, some of the worst legislation for education or policy in general comes out of our General Assembly.
And the anti-union attitude that goes along with it. And as they're debating now the budget and they're sticking in their amendments, there's some anti-union issues there.
Well, I said when we came back from Wisconsin in 2011, I said, get ready, because it's coming. All of the ugliness we saw out of Scott Walker, all of the ugliness in the thievery we saw, like thieves in the middle of the night passing Act 10, it's going to come to Pennsylvania. And sadly, it has. I take no joy in being right in that.
I agree.
What we need to do is we need to get some of these bums out of office and undo the most gerrymandered state in the country.
Oh, it's a disgrace where you have the majority of people in this state registered Democrats, and that we can only have a couple of representatives in Congress.
5 out of 18.
It's wrong, and it's not democratic. And we pride ourselves on being a democracy. It's time for us to start to act like one.
I'm right there with you, Ted. It's always great talking with you. I appreciate you taking time for us. Great to see you here.
I'm always happy to be in your company and talk to you. So thanks again for the opportunity.
Good man, good friend. Our good friend Ted Kirsch. He's Vice President of the International at AFT, the American Federation of Teachers. Quick break, right back here from St. Louis. Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Check out our website, thericksmithshow.com, as we continue our coverage here from the AFL-CIO's convention in St. Louis. The other day, we stopped at the grocery store, pick up a couple of things while living in the hotel, and I came across the display of Oreo cookies. And yes, a couple of the guys in the crew wanted cookies. The first thing I did was flip over the bag, because as we've been talking about on the program for a long time, check the label. Especially with the Oreo cookie, the billion-dollar cookie. And what did we find? Well, we found this picture of it made in Mexico. And you know what I did? I put the bag right down, which is what I suggest everyone do. And that's why I'm sitting here with Anthony Jackson. Anthony, thanks for taking time for us.
Oh, thank you.
Anthony is one of the displaced, fired, left by the curb, the sidelines, Nabisco workers, as Nabisco moved their facility to Mexico, where those cookies come from. You see that bag, I'd be really furious.
When you see that bag, not only should you put it down, but go talk to the store manager. Let him know that it's not okay for them to have that product. Tell them they can talk to the vendors to bring in made in America Nabisco products. Because we have Nabisco plants across the country that still make these products.
Right.
But as long as Mondelez Nabisco, Mondelez being the parent company of Nabisco, as long as they can sell the made in Mexico Nabisco product while exploiting the people in Mexico, they're going to do it. So if we can stop them by not only just not buying it, but also telling the vendors we don't want it, then we can stop this whole process.
So I probably should have gone and talked to the manager, but what I did is I just turned all the bags over. So the first thing you're going to see is that
And
made in Mexico?
Because one of the things we have to do is we have to teach more people. Myself and one of my colleagues, we've been going across the country for the last 18 months trying to educate people more about this plight that we're going through that cost me my job and is in fear of costing a lot of other people their jobs as well. In Chicago, we had 600 people laid off because of this run to the bottom, the corporate run to the bottom, where they're just exploiting people in Mexico and American workers by taking jobs away from America and taking them down to Mexico, where they're paying pennies on the dollar.
Right. You know, one of the things I give you guys ultimate credit for is that a lot of these facilities over the years have closed. I think the President Trump says 60,000 manufacturing plants have left this country.
Yes.
You guys have stuck with this. You guys have been out there. You know, every time I turn around, I'm seeing you guys somewhere saying, "Look, this is wrong, and we're going to hold this company accountable." And we, as working people, we as a working class, we have to check the label. We have to use our buying power to punish bad actors and people who are doing this kind of stuff.
Yes, we've worked with a number of groups, the IWJ, the Interfaith Workers for Justice. We work with the AFLCIO. We work with, we want to give you great thanks because you've been one of our biggest supporters in this campaign. But we've been working with a lot of people because, one, there's a tipping point always of where there's a point of no return. And with 60,000 jobs already have left the country off to Mexico, you get close to that point where it'll get to the point where these jobs are going to leave and never come back.
Right.
We understand that, so we have to fight to stop this at this point. If we don't, we'll get to a point where all the jobs are gone and we'll have homelessness and poverty all over this country.
Well, was that the plan? I mean, you guys have really done a great job of raising awareness. Was the plan to close that plant down? Because look, in Philadelphia, in Pennsylvania where I live, Philadelphia was a big Nabisco plant. They've just torn it completely down. It's gone.
Right.
All those jobs gone, those lives ruined. Was that the plan in Chicago?
It wasn't. They never officially said it was a plan, but all signs pointed to them doing the exact same thing they did in Philadelphia. In Philadelphia, what they did was they didn't close the plant immediately. They just reduced the.
They bled it dry.
They bled it to the point where they said it wasn't right for them to have just one line run. It wasn't affordable for them to do it, and then they closed the plant. That's what they were trying to do here in Chicago as well. But we've worked hard. We worked with a lot of different, aliases and everything, allies, to work at getting this plant back up and try and get some more work into there and try to repatriate the jobs there.
Yeah, and the other part of this is, as a union, as negotiating contracts for the existing jobs, there's always that fear of, well, we did move those 600 jobs to Mexico. We could take the rest if you ask for too much.
Right.
Or if you ask for anything.
Well, there's a fear of that, but we must be steadfast in our belief that we are doing the right thing. Because we're doing the right thing, we will win in this campaign. I mean, again, like I said, there is a fear of it, but there's more of a fear of not fighting.
Right.
If we don't fight, then we know they'll take the jobs away.
Yeah, I mean, the reality is 60,000 manufacturing plants gone.
Yes,
and the thing is, and I was saying this at the beginning, what would have happened to that first plant that closed, that we had militant workers like you who were going to say, you know what, we're going to hold somebody accountable. And that every time one of these plants closed, the exact same thing happened. And that people were finally aware that, these companies are moving not because they can't make it, but just because they're greedy and they want more.
Right. Well, we want to set an example like that. We want to show that we do have power as workers. For too long, companies have thought of worker as, we have all the power, you just work for us. We do have power as workers.
Right.
We are the ones who make the billions of dollars for those companies. We're not unskilled labor. We're skilled laborers. So they have to see that and acknowledge that, and that's what we're trying to do.
I can tell you in our household, there hasn't been a Mexican-made Oreo in our house, ever. I have made sure of that. My kids, look, I've got an 8-year-old and an 11-year-old. They run, can we get cookies? And first thing they do is they look. And I think that's what we have to do as societally. We have to train our children and train all of us as consumers to be a little smarter on how we spend our money.
I agree. Not only do we need to train them on how to be smarter to spend our money, but I think we need to train them more on the positives of unions as well. If it wasn't for our union, the BCTGM, the Bakers Union, right now we would be under. We would be out without jobs, everybody that's at that plant, instead of just the ones who couldn't get back in right now. Yeah. And we still hope to repatriate those jobs. But if it wasn't for the union, we would all be just up a creek, basically.
And that's the other thing I wanted to get to, because, you know, at the end of the day, if you didn't have a union there, no one would have ever heard this story. You guys,
No.
everyone would have just gone, and it would have been horrible, but you would have been absorbed into one social program or one crummy job or homeless, or you'd have been gone.
Right.
Had it not been for being union members and being organized, we may never have heard it, and there'd be Mexican-made Oreos in the Smith household.
I agree. Not only would you have never heard of it, and it wouldn't have just affected Chicago, but the plants in Fairlawn, New Jersey, Richmond, Virginia, Atlanta, Georgia, and also Portland will be on the way going out of the door as well because of this situation. They just said, oh, we could do it in Chicago. Chicago is the largest bakery in the country.
Wow.
So if they could do it to Chicago, they could do it anywhere else.
So let me ask you, last line of questioning, because this is really about people. And there have been still, while you guys have done a good job of keeping as many people as possible, some people still have fallen by the wayside and have lost their jobs. What's happened to those folks? Do we know?
A lot of them have gone back to school, going back for vocational training. Some have worked in other fields where they're making a lot less. They basically have fought, though, still, to hopefully come back one day. They're doing what they have to do to survive, but they're looking to come back. And we're trying to get them back. We're doing things like I said, we've been across the country for the last 18 months. Plus, we have things lined up in the future with going down to Salinas, Mexico, with the IWJ, as well as doing a Veterans Day thing on the 9th of November. So we have a lot of things lined up. We want to fight back. We're going to fight back, and we have fought back, and we will continue to fight back.
Please keep us abreast of what's going on. Let us know what's going on. Anthony, I appreciate you taking time for good on you for keeping up the fight. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
We all do. And it's something I got to tell you, we should all be doing. Any time a plant closes, the workers should be in the streets, active and continuing to fight so that maybe the next plant doesn't close. I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break, back here from St. Louis, the AFL-CIO convention. Back to the Rick Smith Show, our coverage of the AFL-CIO's convention. The other day they passed a resolution. We need more union members to run for office. And I've been saying that for years, and it's not new. But the idea that we're going to resolve to get more people from the ranks of the employed, from those skilled pipe fitters and truck drivers and folks to run for public office, to get into the halls of power, well, to make policies that benefit us, I think is a good idea. That's why I've asked William McGee to come sit down. James McGee to come sit down with us. Why don't I say William? James, I appreciate you taking time for us. Thanks so much.
My pleasure, my pleasure.
So
thanks for having me.
You go from being a pipe fitter to now running for public office. Tell me how does that get that way?
Well, it's a rather circuitous route. When I was at the local union, I was head of our COPE committee. I started our local union's PAC, was on the CLC, was their COPE director. So I was very involved. I was involved politically and was involved also with the Democratic Party. I was a Democratic Party committeeman in Upper Allen Township, where I lived in central Pennsylvania. Then I was working for the Pennsylvania Healthcare Cost Containment Council. I got very involved in healthcare and got a job here in DC. With healthcare reform, I started getting more involved, especially in the single payer movement. And that's been my primary political focus for the last maybe 10 years. But after the last election, I just came to the realization that we need to move the Democratic Party to more progressive, more worker-oriented policies, and I just decided that the best way to start is at the local level. Montgomery County in Maryland has something unique that I probably wouldn't have been able to run for political office elsewhere. They have public financing, and that was the contributing factor to my decision to step forward and
put your name on the ballot. You hear that story all over the place. I'd love to run, but how do I raise $50,000 to $100,000, $1 million to run a congressional campaign? And the idea of leveling the playing field seems sin rational to me.
Absolutely. In my mind, there's kind of two pieces to make this work. One piece clearly is public financing. There's another piece that people often overlook, and that is paying legislators a decent income. I mean, you look at some state legislators; they pay their legislators like $1,500 a year.
Yeah, look at Vermont. Look at New Hampshire.
Well,
they've got like 1,000 of them.
I mean, it's fine if it's only a part-time gig, but the reality is that you're turning your state legislators over to lobbyists who have other sources of income, who can allow their employees to work part-time and be engaged in the legislative process. But for a working pipe fitter or steel worker or communications worker or public employee, they can't do that. They're not going to be able to get time away from their job for 6 months out of the year or 3 months out of the year, whatever it requires to do that kind of work.
But don't we hear this quite often? We need citizen legislators.
Absolutely.
We need part-time citizen legislators. And you go, who are those people going to be? They're going to be people wealthy enough to be able to take that kind of time off.
Right, exactly.
And are those people going to have our interest in mind? And
exactly.
No, they're not.
You're right.
And I think this is where we're seeing politics becoming the polo of the rich again.
Yep.
I mean, it's now only a game for people who can self-fund campaigns.
So in Montgomery County, we have a system that basically says if a Montgomery County resident donates money to my campaign, if you donate $10, that's worth $50 to me.
Wow.
Yeah. And it's
so
actually,
you're going to go out there stumping for those small donations.
And it's actually structured to favor smaller donations. So the first $50 is matched 4 to 1. The second $50 is matched 3 to 1. And the third $50 is matched 2 to 1.
Wow.
So, and I can't accept more than $150. I can't accept donations from PACs or from corporations. So it's a very, very, I think it's one of the first in the country, certainly the first in the country since Citizens United.
Wow. I mean, again, you come back to, that seems somewhat sane and rational because you want small donations. And I think by having those small donations, you get more people involved in the political process.
And that's actually key to the process too. If you look at so I'm running in District 1 in Montgomery County. Montgomery County is one of the richest counties in the country. And District 1 happens to be the richest district in Montgomery County. So as a labor union candidate, I'm sort of behind the 8 ball. But it's actually a very progressive county, and I'm actually finding a lot of resonance talking about issues, the bigger issues. So it's good.
Well, the fact that you got it in the state anyway, the public financing election is pretty impressive. I mean, but you talk about other things that we need, like single payer. I mean, at the end of the day, we need people who are going to step into the halls of power, not just at the local level, but also at the federal level, who are going to say, we need policies that are going to benefit working people.
Absolutely, and one of the issues at the county council level is the fight for $15 minimum wage, and they haven't been able to get that through the council yet. And Montgomery County, as I said, is one of the richest counties, also one of the most expensive counties. And the idea that you can't get a minimum wage for $15, the idea that they want to postpone it out to 2023, which is the current proposal on the table at the county council level, is ridiculous. I mean, when you come right down to it. I mean, so.
But let me ask you, as a union guy, because I've got some of my union friends going, we shouldn't even be pushing anything for minimum wage increases. Those people should be joining unions, and we should be bargaining for higher wages for everybody.
I think that's a rather provincial view. I think unions need to recognize that they represent, and the AFL certainly does this in many, many ways. They represent all working people. It's easy to fall back into this kind of provincial view of representing only our people, but ultimately, when you raise the boat for all working people, you raise the boat for union members. I mean, I was engaged in Vermont over the single payer stuff because some of the public employee unions were a little bit, had a lot of questions about single payer. And one of my points was, if you want to take the target off their back, then what you have should be available to everybody in Vermont.
Absolutely. No, I've said that 1,000 times. In fact, I would like the unions to take over the healthcare, because look, I had union healthcare for the vast majority of my working life, and there was never a question if I got sick if I could see a doctor. There was never a question if I got sick, was I going to go bankrupt? I was going to get to see a doctor, and I was never going bankrupt. Why can't we extend that kind of insurance to everyone?
No, I absolutely agree. What can I say?
It's almost a no-brainer. So let me ask you, out of this convention,
explaining the obvious to the oblivious,
So out of this convention, as someone who's running for office, you see the resolution. Does that help you? What do you think?
Well, I've been in touch with the unions in the DC Metro Council, and I hope to win their endorsement. I haven't yet, but I look forward to their help and their support.
Yeah, well,
make this happen.
James, I appreciate you taking some time for us. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Good talking, and best of luck. And I hope people in your district will send you $10.
I do too.
At least.
Well, the whole county. Anyway, it doesn't have to be in my district, as long as it's a county resident.
Or 150, because that's where the matching is, right?
Well, one of the things I've said to some family members knocking on doors, I said, two $50 donations are worth more to me than one $100 donation. So write separate checks, husband and wife.
There you go. Good stuff. James, thank you so much.
Okay.
Let's take a quick break back here from the AFL-CIO convention in St. Louis. Right back. Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out our website, thericksmithshow.com, as we continue our coverage here of the AFL-CIO's convention from St. Louis. One of the things they're going to talk about today is healthcare, the idea of single payer. But a lot of when we talk about healthcare is just, if I get sick, if I fall down and scrape my knee, if my kid falls off my bike, will I be able to see a doctor? If I get cancer, will I get treatment? I've yet to hear much about mental health issues. What are we going to do going forward with people who are struggling with depression or other mental health issues? And that's why I've asked Sal Rizzoli to come sit down and talk with us. He's the president of the National Union of Healthcare Workers. Sal, thanks for taking time for us.
Pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me.
So, you know, I look at this debate on healthcare, and look, we all want to make sure that if our kids fall off the bike and scrape their knee, we get to see a doctor. But you guys are working on this idea of, you know, mental health being part of this, right?
Right. Finally, you know, mental health awareness is increasing, but it's going to take a long time to get rid of the stigma associated with mental health care.
Right.
And if a kid, you know, like comes to school with a broken arm and his arm is in a cast, everybody wants to sign the cast, right? But if a child comes to school with some behavioral health issue that they missed some school for, they're shunned, right? You know, so that number one, we have to get rid of the stigma. You know, there are federal laws that call for parity of mental health care with medical care. They're not enforced.
Right.
It doesn't happen. So, you know, in California, we represent 3,000 psychologists and other mental health clinicians, and, you know, recently had a 5-year battle. These folks work for Kaiser Permanente all over California. A 5-year battle over a contract, and the leading issues was access to mental health care, and treatment, and enough staffing, and the right place to receive mental health care. And, you know, I'm happy to report that finally Kaiser decided to listen to the people that provide the care. We taught the organization about the shortcomings, and we're now collaborating to make Kaiser Permanente the model mental health care provider. They've hired 800
That's great.
clinicians. Yeah, it's exciting. We're also working with Patrick Kennedy on a national level. When he was in Congress, it was his #1 issue. In fact, he authored the federal legislation that calls for parity with mental health care, but it still doesn't exist.
Yeah.
So look forward to working with him to increase advocacy in Congress and in state capitals to progress it and truly achieve parity. You know, I met with him the other day, and he had this. This was his statement. You know, we have to look forward to the day where we never use the term mental health care again. It's simply health care.
Right.
Right.
Well, I mean, because you know, you think of a lot of things, and I think, you know, when I was a kid, you saw people coming back from Vietnam, for instance, and they were broken, and you know, they were shunned and left to the side. Now I think we're doing a little bit better job of identifying some things, not as good as we should, not as much as we should, but I guess my question is, as you look at the military and some of the mental problems that are coming back from Iraq and Afghanistan, is it going to make it easier for people who have mental illness or have some problems to maybe not be stigmatized, if that makes any sense?
I think that
because it's a difficult thing to talk about.
It is, and I think the high suicide rate among veterans because of mental health care issues is making it more public, so more people are talking about it. And it's the opioid crisis that, you know, the opioid crisis is a mental health care problem. You know, it's not a drug problem. It's not a law enforcement problem.
How's that?
Well, because people are addicted to opioids, right? It's a mental health care issue, right? It's not a law enforcement issue. And the fact that there's such a high number of suicides, accidental suicides, in Republican congressional districts, rural America.
Right.
It's not the inner cities anymore.
Right, and I've
It's
said
not
a number of
crime
times.
issue, right?
Right, I've said a number of times when it was just the urban areas and it was the junkies in the urban areas.
Right.
Nobody cared, but now that it's hit white suburban America, it's now a crisis. You know, and a lot of people are trying to figure out how to stop the pain.
Right. We recently did a Capitol tour where we took our clinicians to D.C. and met with senators and representatives, Republican and Democrat. Republicans are starting to listen to this because it's affecting their districts.
Right.
So hopefully we'll be able to move it faster.
Well, I hope so, because, you know, you think about healthcare. Healthcare should be a nonpartisan issue. We all want to go to the doctor. We all want to make sure our families are safe and secure. We want to make sure that we don't go bankrupt if we get sick. We want to make sure if we have issues that they're cared for. I mean, at least that's my thought on it.
Absolutely. Yep.
Now, you guys have done something really very interesting in California. You guys evidently just had a debate, and this, I find this fascinating, and the kind of, you know, almost Athenian democracy that, you know, I like the idea of. You brought all of your delegates and all of your folks to your convention, had the candidates duke it out, and at the very end of it, voted to win your endorsement.
Yep, and actually, before the convention, we spent 3 months doing an educational organizing campaign from Eureka to San Diego in our hospitals and clinics, where members reviewed the comprehensive questionnaire of the 4 leading Democrats. We invited the Republicans, they decided not to come.
Right.
And debated it, and gave preferences to their stewards that came together last Sunday, listened to this 90-minute debate, and then by secret ballot endorsed, who we hope is the next governor of California, Gavin Newsom.
Right. Why do you think the Republicans didn't come? I mean, I've always been of the mindset, again, healthcare being should be a nonpartisan issue. Why wouldn't their ideas be? Why wouldn't they be willing to come and?
It beats me. Our members, we don't get to choose our members. Our members are whoever our employers hire, and they work in virtually every county in California. And some of our members voted for Donald Trump, right? And about 20% of our members are Republicans. So why they choose not to deal with this is beyond me. You'd have to ask them.
I mean, especially since it's a unique idea that you're going to come in, we're going to debate it out, and at the end we're going to cast a ballot, and you could walk out with the endorsement.
Certainly possible.
I mean, I would love to see that go even further. But being from California, let me ask you the other side of this, because California was supposed to be that place where single payer was going to happen, much like Vermont. Why hasn't it happened yet?
Well, it is going to happen.
It's going to happen?
It is going to happen.
I love your optimism.
It absolutely is. Well, we've been working on it since the early 90s.
Right.
And we've known since then that, we're working on a legislative, solution, right? There's a bill in our assembly now. But no matter what happens, even if we pass this in the legislature, it's going to be put on the ballot in California. There's going to be an initiative. Because if we win in the legislature, the insurance companies will put a repeal of it on the ballot in 2020. So it's fundamentally important to do deep education among consumers, the electorate, and that's what's happening. Our coalition is deeper and broader than ever before. Polls are now showing that a majority of Californians, single payer Medicare for all makes sense to them. So I am optimistic and look forward to 2020 when it's on the ballot one way or another and we finally win.
Yeah, I look forward to it as well, because it just seems common sense. Yeah. One giant pool. Right. Sal, I appreciate the time. It's really great talking with you.
Yeah, good talking to you, Rick. Thank you.
You never know what you're going to find here at these conventions. I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break, right back. Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. We're here at the AFL-CIO's convention in St. Louis. Back a couple years ago, we had done a labor history tour. Took the kids all across the country, drugged them across the country, if you hear their stories, to find labor's history. And one of the things that I found is that, well, in a lot of places it's been destroyed, and in many places it's been rewritten. And the question becomes is, how do we save the history of the working class? How do we save that history, and should we? That's why I've got Ben Blake here to come talk with us. He's an archivist at the University of Maryland at College Park. Ben, thanks for taking time for us.
Well, thank you for this great opportunity.
I guess first, for those of us who don't know, what's an archivist?
Well, what we do is take in original material, unique items, usually one of a kind, records of organizations. It might be photographs, videotapes, audio tapes, those kind of things, and we preserve them and make it available to researchers, and which could be, the general public, students, rank and file union members, union leadership. So the difference between an archivist and a librarian basically organizes and catalogs published materials. So there's, thousands of copies or hundreds of copies out there. Archivists deal with material that generally there's one copy of, and it's unique. So. And generally documents an organization or personal papers of an individual. Those are kind of the two main things, or it might be a government agency also. Yeah.
So. I go back to this trip we took, and one of the things that I learned almost immediately is that labor's history is being rewritten.
Yeah.
And it's so important to have those first-hand accounts. And look, I was a graduate of the Meany Center, and they had a wonderful archive. to where you could actually go back and read the records of the founding, the founding meetings of the AFL and the founding meetings of different unions, and you could see in their words at that moment.
Yeah.
And to me, that's priceless.
Yeah. And that, like at Maryland in 2013, we received the mini archives. So basically, the entire archives was transferred to us when the Labor College closed. So we're continuing that tradition, and the guys that we have now are all the ones that the mini archives created, and we're beginning to build on those. But you can't beat looking at the original material. It really gives you a sense of what it was like to be there. And also, like you say, right now, I mean, in an era where Ronald Reagan's being honored as a labor hero, somebody who broke the PATCO union and really started the striker replacement movement in management, that tells it all in terms of the importance of preserving the history for the union movement and for the working class as a whole, for everybody.
Yeah.
One of the things that we're doing as an example to bring this out, I mean, the tough part for archives, we have usually a small staff, a lot of limited resources. Sometimes we kind of do the rescue thing where somebody's closing, we hear that they may be throwing things away, so we get there before they get thrown out. A lot of times they may not know about us, so getting the word out that we're there, that we're available to take in labor records if you're thinking about throwing them out or something is really something we've done a lot of.
Right.
And then the other thing is making it available digitally. So a lot of people can't travel to College Park. If you're in California, it's hard to go. So we're trying to get as many things digitized as we can. We have the AFL-CIO News, the whole run digitized and online. We put that online a couple years ago. We just put online last year the CIO News. So you can go back to the original newspapers, and it's a great source to counter what you're talking about, the falsification of fake history or from a conservative or management oriented view. If you can go online and you can see the original newspapers of the time, you can see a totally different view of what was going on. You can go back, look at AFL-CIO News and PATCO and look at what Reagan did and what really happened.
Right.
And there's a book out, Joe McCartan wrote a book on PATCO that talks about that, and part of the material he used was from our archives. So that's one of our roles too, is to make the archives available to scholars that are writing about labor history and writing real history that'll be useful to the labor movement.
And not just reinterpretations of myths and made up ideas. But here's the thing, I mean, a couple of years back, and maybe you remember this, it was like 2010, 2011, there seemed to be across this country a push to continually wipe out labor's history. I know in Alabama they had a really nice labor archive and a labor education center that was closed down because of money. And unfortunately they saved some of their stuff. I know in Pennsylvania IUP ended up doing away with theirs. And a lot of this stuff, they just say, you know what, chuck it, we don't need it.
Yeah.
And there aren't a lot of places like the University of Maryland that you can donate that stuff to.
Yeah, and that I think that's really true. It kind of went hand in hand with eliminating labor studies. As they were eliminating labor studies and really trying to reduce labor history too on campuses, reduce the number of professors teaching it and those kind of things. That kind of went hand in hand with labor archives. A lot of the smaller labor archives programs, they cut a full-time labor archivist and combine it with other jobs, that kind of thing. So and the other thing is space. We need a lot of space to store all these records. A lot of stuff, still
temperature control and all of that, so that it doesn't get destroyed. But I think it's that important that we have to do that, because look, we hear this all the time, and you as an archivist, maybe you can speak to it better than I can. That old saying, if you don't learn from history, you're doomed to repeat it.
Yeah.
You look at a lot of the discussions they were having 100 years ago in labor. Yeah. It's the same stuff we're talking about today. We're repeating history with just different flavors. I talk about the Lochner era a lot on our program. And you go back and you look at the arguments that they were making for liberty of contract. We're making the exact same arguments today, only we're calling it freedom.
Right, right. And eliminating the gains of the past are called reforms now, when in fact they're taking things away. It's really kind of a reactionary kind of actions. But yeah, I think what's really important is that, like you say, that the original record really, you go back, like in our exhibit, we have an online exhibit that shows for example, on immigration. Well, the labor movement started out in the 19th century, it's pretty conservative, pretty much anti-immigration, but over a period of time, totally reversed the position and evolved, and things like the farm workers had a big impact. So today, the labor movement is championing, the rights of the undocumented workers, and that's a really important story to show how the labor movement interacted with over time, all these various social justice movements, and changed the labor movement and helped change those movements too, so that they're mutually supportive of each other.
Well, because do you think they figured out that the divide and conquer mentality? Because look, we could point to hundreds of instances of convict lease programs in the South to pit white and black workers against each other. Immigrants and natives against each other. There's all of this history that we got to learn from, where we go, we made these mistakes. Let's not do it again.
Yeah, I was looking, I was doing a little research for our exhibit. I was looking back at the founder of the precursor of the American Federation of Labor in 1881, some of the resolutions they passed: elimination of convict labor, things like legalization of unions, which now is under threat. It goes back, and that's 1881. It's the same kind of issues still resonate today, and that's why that historic record, learning about the past to make a better future, not just to study it kind of for its own sake. We really want to study it to make a better society. And if we don't have that history, there's no way you can do that. You're kind of flying blind. You're kind of starting over again, reinventing things. And the history is so tremendous. There's been so many amazing struggles on a whole range of issues. And like our job in the labor archives, more and more, it used to be back, 20, 30 years ago, we'd kind of sit back in the archives and just kind of let stuff come in and be kind of passive and work back in the stacks. Now, with the digital revolution, our biggest part of our job now is to make people aware of us, make things accessible, so that things like you're talking about, when people try to destroy the records, people will call us and we can come in and rescue any records that are under threat. That's really a key role now. And
well, you had told me an interesting story yesterday that where I grew up in Cleveland, LTV Steel was going under, and a lot of their records were being lost, and one of the big corporate law firms, which will go unnamed, they wanted to chuck all these records because why, as a corporate law firm, what interest is it in for them to have these records preserved?
Yeah, and that was a liability issue. Like a lot of times corporate America, they just want to save stuff that makes themselves look good, or branding, those kind of issues. Like Coca-Cola has a big archives that's more about branding, rather than the real history there. And
that's the problem. Steel, I mean, that's really the problem when we've turned history into how do we use it for our benefit instead of what it actually is. And historians are, look, if historians can disagree over facts, I'm okay with that. When we start rewriting it to make us look better, or for a certain, I'll give you an example. We went to Martinsburg, West Virginia on our tour, and we ended up looking for this marker that was supposed to be at this roundhouse where the Great Strike of 1877 started, the railroad strike. Long story short, I had to go through the roundhouse, jump off the platform, walk a quarter of a mile along the railroad tracks, and look up on the other side of an alley to find this marker, which it looked like there were 50 corporate guys and one labor guy coming together on an agreement of what the workers did in 1877, because they had not only hidden it, they had whitewashed it. And that to me is not how we should be dealing with this kind of history, which is why I loved the archives, because you could hold in your hands that stuff and you could read their words. Which is why I got to be honest, what we see coming out of President Trump and out of the Twitter thing, in 100 years, those people are going to be able to hold those tweets in their hand, and they'll make their decisions based on exactly what they read.
And it's like in creating this exhibit, which the theme is like the history of the labor movement, particularly AFL-CIO, the kind of mainstream labor movement, its relation to social justice. It's like every day, it's like an issue comes up and go, oh yeah, we have a section in the museum about that. Immigration, we have a section on that. Environmental justice, we have a section on that. The fight for 15, living wage. It seems like every day a tweet comes up that we have a direct sort of anecdote to that's documenting the real history. And I think that you're absolutely right. Like, one of the things I think, archives and history is kind of a pillar of democracy. I mean, if you look at, say, you know, the Nazi Germany and stuff, what did they try to do? They try to destroy
Wipe it all
history
out,
and rewrite it, and that's something we never want to see here. And so, you know, that's one of the things that I feel is very important. Like our National Archives was really founded in the 1930s, and I don't think that was a coincidence. You know, you look at what was happening in Europe, and they said, no, we really need to preserve our history here, our Constitution, our freedoms, our Bill of Rights. We have to make sure that that's absolutely preserved so that it doesn't get taken away.
Yeah. So as a historian, I mean, as an archivist, as someone who's passionate about history like you are, how frustrated are you that it seems that we're in an era of know-nothingism, and an era of, you know, where almost intelligence and critical thinking is mocked? I'm struggling with that because, you know, I love delving into things, and yet facts don't seem to matter anymore. We're in a world of alternative facts, to use a Kelly Conway term. Which
is really dangerous, because if you start looking at quote-unquote alternative history, I mean, there are Holocaust deniers, for example, that today publish books saying Holocaust never happened, you know, and that kind of thing is extremely dangerous. Like in our exhibit, we had a module on religious freedom for that reason, and talked about the labor movement founding the Jewish Labor Committee, which played a big role in funding refugees, getting them out of Germany, and funding the underground. The underground labor movement was trying, and the underground against Hitler. And to me, that's a great example, because you look at Charlotte, and you know, you have anti-Semitism coming back, you know, along with Islamophobia and all these problems. And you have to, I think, be able to show the history that, oh, there's a whole decades and decades and over a century of the labor movement fighting against anti-Semitism and fighting for the rights of religious freedom and defending those rights, really for 200 years. And that's so important, because those rights are taken away. Well, then everyone's rights start. You know, it's
the old Pastor Niemöller quote.
Yeah, exactly. If a certain group's rights are taken away, then all our rights are immediately threatened, and it will be just a matter of time before we lose all our rights. They're all interconnected.
Yep.
And I think that, like the 1877 rail strike, you know, is a great example. I mean, you know, we were talking about Bill Berry and his efforts to get the plaque put up in Baltimore.
He's done fantastic work there in Baltimore.
Yeah, and it's just a huge struggle. It took years. And I know, like in Youngstown, I worked there a couple of years and helped, to some extent, work with the Steel Museum in the university. And you know, the plaque there says, oh, there was a little steel strike in 1937. There was kind of, you know,
they got sheet and tube right.
yeah. But it doesn't talk. The 2 workers were killed on the picket line. They were shot. Unarmed workers were shot and killed on the picket line, and that whole sort of steel war gets completely, you know,
just totally whitewashed.
But then you have the Steel Museum that has the real history, and you can go in there and you can see, you know, a scrapbook kept by one of the organizers that talks about, you know, what really happened, and the Union leaflets, like the National Guard's intelligence collected all the Union leaflets and all this. You can go to the Ohio Historical Society and you can see their intelligence reports, and them making reports saying, oh, this is terrible, you know, they have a leader of the Union is an African American. You know, they didn't use that word, they used the worst word. And it's wonderful to be able to see that you don't get in that plaque, you know. You get it in the Ohio Historical Society and in the archives.
And seeing that history firsthand.
Yeah.
So let me ask you this, last question I've got for you, because I could sit here, and you're fascinating, I could sit here and talk with you all day. You know, I've done a number of labor history, I've done the labor history tour, we've done a civil rights tour. You know, we do this stuff with the kids and as part of the program. There are things that I've touched, there are things that I've seen that you go, that's going to stay with me till the day I die. Our civil rights tour, I actually put my hands on the jail cell bars that King was behind when he wrote the letters from the Birmingham jail. You know, you see those things. Is there anything that you go, you know what, there was this one thing that this is it? Is there one thing?
Well, way back, I had a job way back years ago as a student assistant at the Reuther Library, and I remember I was just as a student retrieving boxes and things, you know, paging stuff, and I remember going through, and all of a sudden I went through an aisle that had a collection of clubs actually from the sit-down strike that had been made during the sit-down strikes in Flint, and they had bands. They would sleep with the clubs attached to their hands to defend themselves in the occupation of the factory. And once, but the hair stood on my end. I saw that and I was like, wow, that really shows the level of dedication that they had, you know, and that's I think one of the things. But there are many.
Yeah, it's hard to narrow down, but you know, for me, it's holding on to those bars that King held on to. I mean.
Yeah, the other thing, I did research on the Little Steel strike I talked about earlier, and I remember coming across congressional hearings, the La Follette hearings on union, basically the violation of civil liberties, unions' rights, and in there they had x-rays of the workers who had been shot and killed in the Memorial Day massacre that had all the diagrams of all the bullet holes
in their back.
And then you have their video clip, which we're showing here, part of it, that a newsreel that captured that. And those are the things that it shows the sacrifices that, you know, generations before us made. Like, I worked in the steel industry. You know, it was a union job. I made great money. You know, I should have stayed there probably. You know, be retired now. I have a great pension and stuff. But that came out of the Little Steel strike. All those sacrifices. You know, 18 workers being killed on the picket line, and that sacrifice laid the basis for what we have today. And that's why I think labor archives, labor history is so important. And we feel it's really important to bring it right to the unions too, and make particularly the union movement, make it where we're here. You know, if you have historic records, you know, that you need help preserving, you know, we're here, we want to make it accessible, get as much out on the internet as we can, so that people can look at that history and learn from it, and like you say, not repeat the same mistakes, and know when they're being told things that are absolutely false, and to be able to correct that, you know, with that historic record that is really the way to do it, you know, the way to kind of move things forward. It's one of those pieces in the puzzle you need to be able to change society. You know, without the history, you really can't do it. There takes a lot of other ingredients, like all the people today, you know, at the convention here, they're on the front lines. They're doing the day-to-day organizing, and I know they're really busy. So it's hard, you know, maybe to have time to think about history and preserving that, and that's kind of where we come in and can help, you know, so that they can keep doing that frontline battles, and we can be kind of in behind the lines, you know, preserving that history and making it available when they need to take a look back and see what they can learn to then apply it to today, to the battles for today.
That's good thing. Good stuff, Ben.
Okay,
thank
great.
you so much. I appreciate the time.
Really appreciate the opportunity.
I'd love to hear your thoughts. Anything in your past that you remember from grandparents telling tales? I'd love to hear it. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Right back after this. Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out our website, thericksmithshow.com. Here from the AFL-CIO convention in St. Louis. You know, some of the things that they've been talking about here: healthcare, infrastructure, jobs, extremely important. But another one of those issues that has come up is this administration, and, well, the attack on immigrants, the attack on people who were brought here because of political asylum, because of turmoil in their countries, disasters. And now you've got an administration who's saying they're not going to renew this temporary status, and what it could mean. And I've heard these stories numerous times that people who could be here 20, 30 years could be at risk of being deported and sent back home, and their status not being renewed. That's why I'm standing here with Mary Parafit and her interpreter, Rose Metellus-Dennis, who is the president of Unite Here Local 355 in Miami. Marie, thanks for taking time for us.
Merci.
So what does this mean to you? When you hear what this administration is doing, what does it mean to you?
Ça veut dire pour ça fait sur l'administration dit pas pour renouveler TPS.
Là pas pour renouveler TPS ça là un problème pour moi parce que j'ai 15 ans dans pays depuis m'a travail et là depuis pas ta renouveler li et job là m'a obligé perdu et là m'a bien problème. Les fini m'pas pas retourner dans pays encore parce que me venu ici longtemps, j'ai 15 ans, je suis habitué avec je suis habituée avec country Miami. Je ne pas senti ma à l'aise pour me tourner la caille à Haïti parce que je ne suis pas rien encore à Haïti.
It's going to be a big problem for her because she's been living in this country for 15 years and she lost everything that she had back home. If they not renew the TPS, she will lose her job and she pay taxes in the country. She's been a good citizen. She's going to lose everything and she doesn't have any other place to go. And she's already been in the system, like to stay here in the United States. It's going to be a big issue for her.
When did she come to the country?
Qui a noté venu dans le pays?
2002.
2002.
And what brought her here?
Qui ça qui mène dans le pays?
J'ai un problème à faire asile politique dans le pays, j'ai un problème politique. Quand j'ai trouvé une possibilité, j'ai un visa, je viens ici, je trouve faire asile là, je suis ici.
She was involved in political in Haiti. She got some issue there. That's why she left the country and to come here to stay here.
So you feared for your life in your home country, and that brought you here.
Ils ont peur pour la cause, c'est ça pour te venir là.
Yeah, parce que j'ai peur les gens à attaquer ou li di la fort un bagay qu'on a même so possibilité de venir ici tout camper ici parce qu'on va pas tourner encore.
She was so scared because the person attacked her in her house and she was afraid for her life. That's why she came here with a visa and she decided she's gonna stay.
So she came here, as we hear people, Republicans say, come here the right way. She came the right way, right?
Est-ce qu'on vient dans bonnes conditions?
Yeah, I'm living in bonnes conditions, un visa I'm again.
Yes, she came with a visa, yeah, and the right condition.
And now in 2010 there was a huge earthquake. So anything you may have had to go back to is now gone, right?
Ici en 2010 c'était un gros tremblement de terre, tout ça était gagné, est-ce que tu perdu tout?
Yeah, parce que m'de maman ma papa mi mouri dans tremblement de terre, l'infini même m'gen kay me écrasé à tout yo même.
I lost my dad and my mom in the earthquake, and I have my house, so everything was destroyed there.
So what does it mean? What are you going to go back to? What will your life be like if here you're in this country working hard, paying taxes, doing what you were supposed to be doing, and now they're going to force you to go back to real uncertainty and possible even danger?
Ils ont consacré comment ça pied pour vous parce que comme on va vivre dans un pays ça va pas habitué avec encore et qui grand pile danger là-dedans comment on va vivre là-dedans comment sentir.
Bon, on va pas vivre là-dedans parce que avant tout pas connait qui côté me aller à tout quand m'écraser pas même connait qui côté me faire refuge moi là fini même ici depuis m'entrer ici 2002 et depuis 2003 on commence à travailler ici pour jusqu'à nos jours.
She said she cannot come back. She doesn't have anything left there. She doesn't know the street now, after 15 years. She doesn't have a place to go to live there. And she's been in this country for 15 years, always working hard and pay her taxes, and she deserves to stay here.
So you're really a person without a country then, if they send you away and they do this.
Dis si on veut tout nous pas ou son monde qui pas gain pays côté pour aller.
Pas gain pays parce que pays là même pas côté pour aller.
She said, yeah, this is the country is there, but I don't have any family there. I don't have a house. I don't know where I'm going, where to go.
What can we do to help? What do you want people to know, and what should we be doing to help make sure that you don't get thrown out of our country?
Donc qui ça ou t'a vle moun connaît de ou même qui sort t'a vle que moun fait pour capable dans situation ça pour pas mettre dehors dans pays.
Oui, dans pays a marcher sous l'ordre la loi, m'pa faire ça pas ça, m'a travail, m'gè impression faut président pays a faut chef pays ouais prend situation en charge pour ba moi possibilité pour me rester vivre ici parce que m'pa ka tourner la caille encore.
And she said she's been in this country for 15 years, work hard, pay her taxes. She's a good citizen. She never been in trouble with the law. And she deserves for the president and the administration to give her the permit to stay in the country. She doesn't have any other places to go. She asked for support that everybody can support her in order for the president to renew the status and to stay here.
Now, you played by the rules. You did what you were supposed to do. I think at the minimum, we need to help make sure that you're secure here. And talking about the work that you've done, I mean, the fear that I have in going backwards and forcing people back into the shadows is that exploitation and more harm come to you, and I don't want to see that.
Il dit que le pas souhaité pour le pour mon retourner dans caché encore pour mon bral caché pour le travail dans travail qui pas payer mon pour et après l'exploiter mon il pas souhaité ça.
Oui. Oui. Oui, même moi-même tout parce que depuis rentrer ici m'a travail, me payer taxes. Si qu'on a président a vinn pas bail et on statut égal pour être ici, qu'on a le travail mon yo, qu'on a pour tout temps de travail on va passer pour grand messi parce que qu'on a mon yo va payer au monnaie en bas table. Ou pas jamais capable au pays dans le pays, ou pas jamais capable représenter un dans le pays parce qu'en cachette ou va toujours à vivre.
And she said she's agree with you because if the president not renewing the status and she has to be undercover, she's gonna have to work, not paying taxes, and for people is gonna exploit her. And she wants to be live the American dream that everybody's deserve to live here.
Thank you so much for telling us your story.
Okay.
Thank you, and I wish you the best.
Okay.
Merci parce que dit histoire ou les surtout tout bail passé bien.
Okay. Welcome.
Again, another horrible, horrible story. And at the end of this, it comes down to policy. It comes down to the people that we put into power. And look, contact your representatives, contact your senators. This, not right. I'd like to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Right back. Back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out our website, thericksmithshow.com. Here at the AFL-CIO convention. I'm sitting here with Michael Smith. He's one of the, and I hate saying it, he's one of the folks who lost his job at the Nabisco plant when they decided they were going to up and move Oreo, well, or parts of Oreo down to Mexico. And as we talked about earlier today, check the label. You know, as every time I look at an Oreo bag, actually anytime I look at anything, I want to know where it's made. And I think as consumers, we should be doing that. Michael, thanks for taking time for us.
Thank you for having us.
Great seeing you again. Last time I saw you, DNC convention.
DNC convention, yes, sir.
And a lot has changed in the world since then.
Absolutely.
But the one thing that's consistent is you guys are still doing what I think is fantastic work and highlighting the fact that this multinational corporation is taking jobs out of the U.S. and moving them south, and you're making them pay.
Absolutely. We are absolutely educating the consumer because we truly believe that the consumer and beating this corporate giant at the cash register is the answer to our campaign. And this is what direction we're going in, and we're doing a great job at it, we feel.
No, I mean, I spoke earlier with Anthony Jackson, and he said, look, we're going to keep at this.
Yeah, absolutely.
And, I said to him, had we done this at the beginning 20 years ago, had we had someone as dogged as you guys with the BCTGM, had we had folks who were out there going to say, you know what, we're going to hold this employer accountable for moving our jobs, maybe we wouldn't be in this place, and maybe by you doing this, you're going to help stop it down the road.
Absolutely. As we have said in some of our videos that we have launched, that the consumer is the answer. Again, in our campaign, we are now working with the Interfaith Worker Justice Movement, going from community to community across this nation, activating churches, and because churches represent communities. And communities and churches represent people that are also consumers. And when we go after the consumer, I believe that we will cause the corporate giants to sit up and pay attention, but more specifically, Mondelez Nabisco.
So as you're out on because you guys have been out on the road, I mean, you're all over the place.
35,000 miles plus.
You're all over the place. When you talk to people, what kind of response do you get? Is it based on politics where their views are, or do Republicans, Democrats, Independents, do they all get the fact that what's happening to you and what's happened is just flat wrong?
Absolutely, and they're appalled by it. They see the fact that we're looking at a multinational company with an iconic product like the Oreo cookie, and then you want to take something that's totally American and then destroy the very communities that used to produce the product that they're getting rich off of. They're appalled by that, but we must caution our consumers to please check the label. That's hugely important to us because some of the Oreos are still made in America, but we want all Oreos to be made in America. Those in Salinas, Mexico, we want the jobs that were at 7300 South Kedzie in Chicago to be repatriated and brought back here for the American people to enjoy the iconic cookie made right here on American soil.
Absolutely, and again, it comes back to that piece of Americana. And look, we showed the picture of of the bag where you can find made in Mexico
Absolutely,
and what you
absolutely.
should be
Check
looking
the
for.
label.
Check the label. But here again, I look at the decision to move to Mexico, and I can only come to one conclusion. Maybe you can help me, or maybe tell me I'm wrong, but it's only about greed. It's only about money. Look, if you were saying we're going to move a portion of the line to feed the Mexican consumer, that's an
Absolutely.
argument.
Yes.
But it doesn't seem to be that it at all. It's just we're going to make this stuff in Mexico at much cheaper than we could pay Michael Smith or Anthony Jackson or any of the other hundreds of people who've been thrown to the curb. If you were saying that we could be doing it for them and not bringing it back, I could see an argument.
You can see an argument there, yes.
But I don't feel that here.
Right, they want to use us to manufacture the cookies and use us to purchase the cookies. I mean, only, not to manufacture them the way that we used to. This is about corporate greed. When you think about the multiples of lines that were manufactured for all the Nabisco brands, and then you look at $3.5 billion made on the Oreo cookie alone at its height, down to $2 billion just for one product of the brands that Nabisco Mondelez produces. They were making $2 billion, Rick, off the Oreo alone. There was absolutely no reason to send this production line to Mexico other than greed. That was pure unadulterated greed that was at the core of Mondelez making this move, and we are standing up as a labor movement and saying this is un-American.
It is un-American, but again, I go back to 2016, and like I said, we met for the last time at the DNC convention. One of the things I keep talking about is, the Trump supporters have a point. Donald Trump had a point. He stole my message. He stole labor's message. He stole the fact that we want manufacturing. He stole the fact that we should be holding Mondelez or Carrier or name the company who moves out of this country, holding them accountable and responsible. So to me, this could be one of those issues that unites us as a country. Say, no, it's ridiculous that we're going to be making Oreos.
Absolutely.
It's like saying we're going to ship mom out of the country.
Absolutely, or apple pie out of America. It lends credence to the same mantra. Oreos should be made where they originated at, right here in the United States of America, supporting communities and supporting jobs, sustaining income and wages and pensions, so that America can continue to be the country that it is.
Now let me ask you this, and I asked Anthony Jackson this question earlier. There are a lot of people who lost their jobs here.
Yes, sir.
This is a human thing.
Yes, sir.
You've had friends who lost their jobs.
Single moms, single parents, caretakers. It was a horrible time for us at 3 a.m. in the morning when they chose to ship the first segment of the jobs down to Salinas, Mexico. It was a time that I will never forget,
3 a.m. in the morning?
3 a.m. in the morning. I was a third shifter. I worked third shift from 11 o'clock at night to 7 in the morning. My brother Anthony Jackson was a mixer. I was a production line operator, and to see the horror and the anguish and just the pain on the faces of women that were heads of households that were supporting households as a single parent, and caretakers and fathers with children that were just single income households. So it was even myself was a single income household. So it was a very painstaking situation that we were up against. Very much.
So think about that the next time you buy an Oreo cookie and you don't check the bag. Flip it over, make sure it's made here. Because look, at the end of the day, these jobs are really people.
Yes, sir. The jobs represent people in communities across the nation. They represent the 7 bakeries that still exist under the Mondelez flag, and we feel that we deserve better.
So let me ask you a last line of questioning, because this has happened, and I know you want to bring those jobs back. My fear is that this emboldens them to do more. That maybe the rest of the jobs at the Chicago bakery, maybe some of the other ones go, like they did in Philadelphia, where they just recently tore down the Nabisco plant.
We saw the tower coming down, yes.
My fear is in this country we become only a country of consumers, but consumers with no money, because we don't have jobs.
Yes.
Do you see the company moving towards more outsourcing, or do you think what you're doing is making them think twice?
We believe wholeheartedly that we are causing the corporate America community to think very, very seriously about offshoring jobs again, and we are not going to stop. We are not planning, Rick, to go away. We are planning to be and do and stay in this fight as long as feasibly possible.
Michael Smith, good talking to you, man.
Rick,
thank you.
always
Keep
a pleasure, brother.
I look forward to seeing you again real soon.
Thank you.
Going to take a quick break right back here from the AFL-CIO convention. Stick around.
Thank you.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out our website, thericksmithshow.com, here from the AFL-CIO's convention in St. Louis. I'm sitting here with Massachusetts AFL-CIO President Stephen A. Tolman. Stephen, thanks for taking time for us.
Are you kidding me? It's great to be here with you, Rick.
What do you think of this event?
I think this has been a real good event. It's about labor. It's about showing all of the different affiliates here that we are one, and that our enemies are one. We have the same enemies. You might think it's this one or that one. And there's a lot of people that want to destroy the labor movement. They want to take rights away from workers all the time. They want to make healthcare a second mortgage. And they don't want us to have pensions.
No,
so, you know, we're under attack. I mean, I see it as well, you know, Rick, what I really see here is that the leaders of our unions are really coming together and realizing that, you know what, it's got to be a united effort, all of us working together. I'm more optimistic now that we'll have one labor movement and not have a divisive labor movement, because the issues are too important.
Absolutely, but here's the thing, and I've been asking this question for a while, because we've seen these attacks on the labor movement for a generation now. You go back to the shot heard across the boardroom when Reagan fired the Patco workers, and every one of those attacks on workers. At what point does the labor movement say that, you know, the New Deal era, industrial peace era is over? When is labor peace? When is that over and we become a militant movement again? Because look, as you pointed out, the war of labor and capital is always ongoing, and capital right now is winning. When does labor finally wake up that there's actually a war going on?
Well, I guess I think about that and I say, well, if that were going to be the case, do I want to publicize it? If we're going to go more militant, you know what I mean?
Right.
I don't know the answer to that, but let's just look at the litany of problems we face. Now, we have an America where somehow the pharmaceutical industry runs the whole industry. It's not the FDA, it's not the Department of Justice, as we just saw on 60 Minutes, so that they flood all these dangerously addictive drugs, which are ruining a whole generation of young kids with no accountability. And instead of trying to get them better and get them proper treatment, they want to treat them with more drugs because they think they save, you know, the cost of the overnight stays and all that stuff. We have a society that has fallen prey to an industry that is profiting on killing people. And these drugs are dangerously addictive. They are too powerful for the human brain, and somebody's got to let them know that. So that's in the pharmaceutical industry, that's in our medical infrastructure. How many, and people talk about the deaths, we have lost like 200,000 people, 3 times what we lost in Vietnam in just the last decade through this, and nobody is held accountable.
Right. So let me ask you the other side of this, because, you know, look, we've had, when I was a kid growing up in the projects on the west side of Cleveland,
yes,
we had heroin junkies who were dying all the time.
You did.
Nobody cared about that because they were basically urban poor people of color generally.
Right.
Now that it's hit the white suburbs, it's now a crisis.
Well, it isn't so much that, because, and I agree that that's kind of always a counter to this. And I saw crack in particular in the late 80s, early 90s really adversely affect Black America. I mean, it was the worst thing I ever saw. And I saw some guys I worked with who were super people, and one night they went out and then they were in trouble. And what did we do? What did Congress do? They increased the penalties.
Let's lock them up.
So I get that. They did that. In this particular case, it's a touch different because that was crack coming from the street corner drug dealers. This is orchestrated by corporate America.
Right.
And there's a significant difference. And this, you had an industry where they come out and they hired ex-cheerleaders, beautiful women, to go into the doctor's office and to tell them that there's nothing wrong, this is not addictive, so that they deceived not just white America, but all of America. And yes, it is in all the white communities. And yes, it has taken a hard toll on white America. Maybe it took that to wake up and figure out how do we address our drug epidemic, because currently now we know that some of those laws that were put into place need to be repealed. People know that. But once again, if you look of where Congress was, Congress, with the 60 Minutes program, what did they do? The fact that they gutted the Department of Justice, who was going after the 3 major companies that were distributing these drugs, and they went into one county in Virginia of a population of under 400, and in 2 years they gave 9 million pills to that area. So when I say, like, is this just an attack on workers, an attack on middle class? It's when are the middle class going to revolt to take back what is really our nation?
Yep.
Because I used to believe that our nation, our Congress, was looking out for us. But by these actions, what the actions that I saw on 60 Minutes last Sunday night, in my opinion, are tantamount to treason, because they have totally neglected any accountability to what America should be. That's just one example.
Right.
And then you look at what they're doing. Defined benefits, literally, defined pension benefits are going the way of a dinosaur.
They're not already? Did I miss that?
Well, it's way down.
And then you just see the other day that Congress now wants to lower the contribution amount from $18,000 down to $2,400 for 401ks. So not only did they steal and break and destroy defined benefits, they now want to screw up the defined contribution that they told my generation was going to make us all millionaires.
And by the way, that 401k, that was supposed to be a supplement to the defined benefit pensions. It's almost like charter schools. Charter schools, and whatever anyone says, there may be a good charter school because teachers who teach are always good. So you can't say that there's no credibility in the concept. But in Massachusetts, the concept was to create laboratories of innovation and then to take what worked and to make our public schools better.
Share that best practice. And the thing that bothers me with this is our tax dollars designed these best practices, which they turned around, patented, and are now selling back to us. So we paid not only for the research and development of these things, now we got to pay for the ongoing use of them, of the things that work, and the very few things that work that have come out of it.
And there hasn't been anything really brought back, very, very little. But what it's done, it's almost created a 2-tier system of public education. One private, where there's people benefiting and profiting on schools.
And they're not the kids.
No, they're not. They're all run by CEOs. The administrators are big paying jobs, but the teachers have no benefits, no defined benefit pension plan. They get health care maybe, but no accountability. And it's really frustrating. So they're trying to tear down the whole infrastructure where organized labor has set a standard with the ability to collectively bargain for issues and with the ability to stand up against injustice without the fear of reprisal. And these are the things that we're seeing constantly. Corporate America is doing this and think they're benefiting, when in reality, it's organized labor. The people who I'm with down here in St. Louis, it's organized labor that are standing up against injustice, that are challenging the system, and in the inappropriate way they're trying to prohibit people from voting, the inappropriate way that they're treating America's middle class. And we got to do something about it, and I think that's what this convention has done. It's pointed out with integrity how important it is that we understand each other's problems and we work together to make sure that we're standing up against these crazy ideas. And I say, I brought up the opioid epidemic because I understand how bad it is and I've seen the heartache. But I only saw it in Massachusetts, but it is everywhere.
It's everywhere. So to me, part of that, the opioid epidemic problem is not getting people hooked on it in the first place.
Right.
And I often go back to, the best part of that is giving people hope, a good job, the ability to have the thought that they have a future. I mean, I look at myself coming out of the projects. It was a good paying union job that now my kids will never see what I saw growing up.
No, they won't. No,
and it comes back to that job. And I emphasize not just a job, but a good paying union job. And I come from someone who, look, I spent 20 years driving a truck. That job was a good paying job.
But you loved it every day. I could tell by your personality. You loved it every day.
But I could have been doing it for a non-union company making half the money.
Right.
It's because I had that union card, that I was well compensated.
You had integrity and you had ability and accountability. If you had a problem, you knew how to address it.
Absolutely. And that, I think, giving the people that kind of empowerment, maybe they don't turn to drugs then.
Well, I don't think that the difference is that these young people have been prescribed this medication, and they think it's legit because it's prescribed, but it changes the brain, and that's the part that the pharmaceutical industry didn't tell people. It changes the brain, and they have no control over it because it isn't legitimate. It's not good stuff. It is much too powerful for our human brain, and that's the problem. And then when the doctors say, oh no, I can't give you anymore, they've developed a habit so that they get very sick without it, and one thing leads to another. And that's the deception that I see in the pharmaceutical industry, that they, first of all, as I said, they hire cheerleaders that go out and say it's not addictive. And then I'm seeing the profiteers like Purdue Pharma that they're now using, they're $1 billion. First of all, this was just a shell of a company that is now a $15 billion company. And let me tell you that now they're using their profits to try to attack the rights of workers in many states. We had a ballot initiative on charter schools in Massachusetts, and I'm told that the president of that company gave $2 million to support charter schools, which is really about union busting. It's about taking away the right to collectively bargain for what you believe in supporting that concept. Yeah, so maybe it tells me we could organize the pharmaceutical industry. Maybe that's where we're going to get at.
There's a good start. You know, we had a state senator who ran for governor a couple years back that the charter school industry gave him $4 million to run a losing campaign. I do want to change gears back to back to the convention and the hopes coming out of this, because look, you know, I've been calling what's going on in this country the no rights at work agenda for a very long time. The attacks on workers' rights to organize, workers' compensation, unemployment insurance, you know, safety, wages, all of this stuff. Everywhere we see these attacks coming, Massachusetts is the blue of the blue, the liberal state, the pro-worker state supposedly. Are you seeing the same kind of things you're seeing coming out of Wisconsin, Ohio, and eventually Pennsylvania?
And Rick, what you point out about the unemployment insurance, once again, a safety net for the middle class. Now, we have the best benefits in the nation currently, and they point that out often at times, because instead of just 26 weeks, we have the additional 4 weeks. And they think that that's a big deal. And the reason we have that is because, frankly, it's a very high cost of living. Right. And frankly, if you can't find a job, there's nothing wrong with helping people when they're down and out. However, the big push that they're saying, no new taxes. I never understood why Republicans, those people who have all the money, didn't want to increase taxes. But now I realize that the reason they don't want to have a decent amount of money in taxes is because then you can't pay pensions. Then you can't pay a decent health care, so that the cost gets shifted onto the very employees in public service who, when you knew in Massachusetts, it was a concept that if you went to a public service job, you'll never be a millionaire, but you worked hard, but you got your pension and you got health care, and you'd retire with dignity. But now they've even attacked that, and they attacked that by not enough public money to be able to pay that. And in many states, they actually blame police and fire and say that they have these great pensions and that we have to take that and diminish that because we can't afford it. But the facts remain. We've forgot the mission of public good. And public good should be that we invest appropriately in public good issues, and so that we shouldn't be struggling. I don't mind paying taxes. I'm happy to pay taxes, especially when it means a solid infrastructure that I was given when I was growing up. We had a transportation system that worked. We had public schools that worked. We were building schools. We had an infrastructure where you could become successful by a good education, and all of that is crumbling apart. And they constantly say no new taxes and think that's the way to go. That's not the way to go. That collectively we should be proud to pay our taxes because we have accountability and we make sure that the infrastructure is in place for the next generation, so they're not running on a dilapidated transportation system, one that works.
I'm with you, Stephen. It was great talking with you.
It's great to be here.
The time. I got to talk to you again soon.
Well, listen, I keep up the work because you're doing some great work, Rick. Thank you.
Thank you so much. We'd love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break back here from the AFL-CIO's convention in St. Louis. This is The Rick Smith Show.
And James.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out our website, thericksmithshow.com. Here at the AFL-CIO convention, just wrapped up here at the AFL an agreement, an update, a renewal of an agreement between the AFL-CIO and Mexican unions on working together, partnerships, talking about renegotiation of NAFTA, immigration reform, things that are going to help workers on both sides of the borders. And one of the stories that popped onto our radar is what's going on in the telecom industry down in Mexico. And that's why I turned to Francisco Hernandez. He's the head of the Juarez Telecom Union. Francisco, thanks for taking time for us.
The Mexican Telecom. Entonces, you have a question?
Yeah, thanks for being here.
Okay. Gracias por llegar aquí para hablar con nosotros.
Gracias. Bueno, me da gusto estar aquí hoy en la convención de la AFLCIO. Nos da además mucho gusto porque hemos firmado un convenio de solidaridad para luchar juntos contra la instalación de un muro que nos separa, para propiciar una reforma migratoria con respeto a los derechos humanos, para luchar porque los empleos se conserven en cada uno de los países donde se generan y sobre todo se mejore el salario de los trabajadores mexicanos. En fin, para desarrollar una serie de acciones que vayan a fortalecer nuestra relación con la AFLCIO.
So it makes us very happy to be here at the AFL-CIO convention, where we've just very excited, especially because we just signed a new updated agreement with the AFL-CIO and the UNT of Mexico, where we're going to work together even more and better on issues like being against the building of a border wall, and on agreements about getting salaries to go up on both sides of the border, and on things that are going to make life better for workers on both sides of the border.
How difficult is the current climate with our president and the rhetoric that you hear coming out of the White House in Mexico for workers there, and in relations to workers here in the U.S.?
¿Cuán difícil es ahora en México con la retórica tan dura que sale de la Casa Blanca en estos días para realmente trabajar en beneficio a los trabajadores mexicanos?
Es complicado porque se han endurecido las relaciones entre México y Estados Unidos por las políticas que se han implementado desde la Casa Blanca, pero nosotros entendemos que tenemos que impulsar el desarrollo de los trabajadores mexicanos, fortalecer los sindicatos y erradicar los contratos de protección a los patrones. Es difícil, pero creo que podemos lograrlo.
It certainly has become harder because the relations between Mexico and the United States have hardened. This is for sure, but it's also the case that we know we have to do this, and we're going to do this, and we're going to do everything we can to the benefit of the workers on both sides of the border, and especially fight against something that's known as the protection contract. Is the kind of contract that actually protects companies from having a real union.
Now, we've got our billionaire leader here in this country. You in Mexico are fighting the wealthiest man in the world in the telecom industry. What's going on in Mexico with the telephone workers and Carlos Slim, the wealthiest man in the world?
Tenemos aquí ese líder millonario. Ustedes también en México tienen, y ustedes mismos están en la lucha con tal vez el hombre más rico del mundo en un conflicto en el sector de telecomunicaciones. ¿Nos puede contar un poco lo que está pasando ahí?
Bueno, en México es el grupo privado más poderoso del país.
This is the most powerful private group in the country.
Se ha señalado por sus biógrafos que tienen como 1000 empresas de distinto nivel.
Various biographers say that he has around 1,000 companies of different sizes and sectors.
De esas 1000 empresas, el único sindicato que no tienen bajo su control es el nuestro.
And of those 1,000 companies, the only union that he doesn't have under his thumb and under his control is our union.
No le gustan los sindicatos, los combate, y pues es una lucha difícil, pero hay que darla si queremos que el país mejore.
It's really difficult fight. It's a really hard struggle, but we have to carry on this fight, and it'll be best for the country if we keep doing what we're doing.
And how will the ties with the AFL-CIO help you in achieving that?
¿Cómo se van a ayudar los lazos y esa alianza con la AFLCIO en esa lucha?
Bueno, nos ha ayudado mucho la exigencia del AFLCIO para que en México mejoren los salarios. La presión del AFLCIO nos sirvió para lograr una reforma laboral muy importante, de manera que sí nos ayuda mucho.
It's helped us a lot. It's helped the pressure of the AFL-CIO to raise wages in Mexico has been really important. It's helped us in all kinds of dealings with these companies. That the labor reform in Mexico was also with the help of a lot of pressure from the AFL-CIO.
Last question I have for you, in looking at the fight that you have and your partnership with the AFL-CIO, we see wages in Mexico low, and jobs moving from the U.S. to Mexico. Would rising wages in Mexico help maybe stem some of the tide of jobs to Mexico, and also while simultaneously making conditions better for workers in both countries?
Bueno, última pregunta es sobre esa posibilidad de realmente subir los salarios en México. Eso ayudaría obviamente al trabajador mexicano, pero ayudaría también en bajar la cantidad de empleos que van saliendo de Estados Unidos. ¿Crees?
Para que en México mejoren los salarios de los trabajadores, para que los bajos salarios no sean una competencia inequitativa para los empleos en Estados Unidos, se necesita que haya libertad y democracia para los sindicatos. La mayoría de los sindicatos están controlados o por los empresarios o por el gobierno, por las mafias sindicales, y eso es nuestro principal obstáculo. Ahí es donde tenemos que poner.
In order to raise wages and have these positive effects that it would have, the most important thing is to have freedom and democracy for workers to have the real unions that they deserve. Unfortunately, most of the unions in Mexico, many unions in Mexico, are totally controlled, sometimes by the company itself, sometimes by the government, sometimes by criminal kinds of organizations. And that's really the number one task to get to the wage increase that would be so good.
Thank you so much, I appreciate it. Let me turn to Mario Gonzalez. He's the head of the pilots union in Mexico. Mario, how is this agreement, this renewal of an agreement, going to help you and your members?
Voy a contestar en español.
Primero
que nada, si me permite, pues agradecer la invitación a la convención y desearles que sigan teniendo mucho éxito en los trabajos. También agradecer todo el apoyo que hemos recibido por la AFL-CIO con el tema del sismo que recién tuvimos en México, el terremoto, el earthquake, y agradecer toda la solidaridad que manifestaron todos los trabajadores y los miembros de la AFL-CIO con nuestras organizaciones.
Thanks. I'd really like to start by thanking the AFL-CIO for the invitation to be here right now, and also thank you for all of the solidarity after the horrible earthquakes that struck in Mexico, all of the help, direct help from workers and from people in the United States.
Regresando a tu pregunta, si bien por una parte soy presidente del sindicato de los pilotos, pero en esta ocasión también representamos a todos los trabajadores agrupados en la Unión Nacional de Trabajadores de México, donde tenemos a los compañeros telefonistas, compañeros de las universidades, compañeros campesinos. Entonces realmente venimos en representación de todos los gremios.
And to get to your question, I'm here as the president of the pilots union, but in this occasion we're here, Francisco and I, together as representatives of all Mexican workers. We have obviously the pilots, but also the telephone workers, but also some public sectors, some university workers, some agricultural workers, lots of different sectors of workers.
Given the divide between Mexico and the U.S. and the divide politically here in the U.S., how do you see our political culture and our political problems right now affecting what you're doing in Mexico, given your divides as well?
Sí, definitivamente tenemos una cultura diferente, que es lo que mencionaba Francisco. Tenemos que buscar estos acuerdos, que lo que estamos haciendo el día de hoy es ratificar un convenio que ya había sido firmado con anterioridad. Iniciamos los trabajos de colaboración en 1999, fue ratificado en el año 2010 y hoy lo estamos actualizando con todos los temas nuevos como el NAFTA, el muro que quieren poner, y es importante que conozcan aquí en Estados Unidos la manera de pensar y de sentir de los trabajadores mexicanos.
I think we do have to recognize that, yes, there are differences between the countries, so a big part of our work is to strengthen the relationship between our organizations on both sides of the border. So we had this agreement for the first time in 1999, we renewed it and resigned again in 2010, and we've updated it more and made it very relevant to what's going on right now, whether it's the border wall or the renegotiation of NAFTA or salaries. That's what we're here working on now, and that kind of strengthening a relationship answers part of your question about the differences between the two countries.
When your members hear our president talk about Mexico's going to pay for the wall, what kind of response do you usually get? Or is your former president the best authority on that?
No, pues básicamente es lo que hemos mencionado en estos días de trabajo, que estamos aquí precisamente para construir puentes, no, porque las barreras realmente lo único que hacen es dividirnos, eso no sirve, eso no funciona. Y se quiere vender mucho la idea aquí en Estados Unidos de que los trabajadores mexicanos están quitándole empleo a los norteamericanos, y eso no es cierto. Lo único que queremos nosotros es seguir trabajando en conjunto, como bien decía el compañero Francisco, mejorar los salarios para que no sea el factor competitivo, que no sea el salario, sino que sea realmente otros factores los que utilizan los empresarios para decidir si invierten en Estados Unidos o en México.
So we're here exactly to this question, hearing a lot about these walls and things, but we're here to build bridges, not walls, because the barriers that people want to put up, all they do is divide us. And to do the things that we're trying to do with things like raising wages, that's what will really help the relationship between the two countries. So that's our
last question I've got for you. As you point out, we want to raise wages for all workers, and we want to break down some of those barriers that pit us against one another. What are you hoping comes out of this, and what do you want American workers to know about workers in Mexico? Because I think part of the divide is we don't know each other very well. So what do you want them to know?
No, yo le quisiera decir a todos nuestros hermanos y hermanas trabajadores de Estados Unidos que tenemos que tener mucho cuidado, sobre todo con el discurso que se está dando, de que hay que acabar con el NAFTA. Acabar con el NAFTA no va a ayudar ni a los americanos, ni a los mexicanos, ni a los canadienses. Lo que tenemos que hacer es precisamente revisar bien las condiciones del NAFTA para mejorarlo. De otra manera, el terminarlo como se ha lanzado de alguna manera una amenaza de tumbarlo, habría gran afectación para nuestro país y habría definitivamente también mucha afectación para los trabajadores norteamericanos.
I really want to say to the brothers and sisters here that it's really important to understand that simply tearing up NAFTA, ending NAFTA, destroying NAFTA isn't the answer. There would be a really negative impact for Mexicans, but also in the United States for workers and in Canada. So that's not what we're talking about doing. What we need to do is give a serious look and study at the details of the trade agreement and improve it and make it better and make it work for workers in all three of the countries, because simply saying no to the agreement and ending it overnight would just create a lot of damage for all three countries.
Mario, thank you so much. I appreciate it. Francisco, thank you so much. Thank you for your time. We'd love to hear your thoughts. You can email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break, right back. Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out our website, thericksmithshow.com. Back here at the AFL-CIO's convention, I'm sitting here with J. David Cox. He's the president of the American Federation of Government Employees, AFGE. David, thanks for taking time for us.
Glad to be here, Rick. Always glad to.
What do you think of this event?
The convention's been one of the best ones I've ever been to. A lot of discussion, a lot of debate, delegates really upbeat, and I'm really glad. It's been the internal focus of what we need to be about as a movement. Yeah, so I'm very proud of that.
One of the things that I've been to a number of conventions over the years, and we've brought our show to numerous conventions, and there's always a lot of politicians and a lot of politicos. None here.
None at all this time. We are talking about what we need to be doing as a movement. Just a few minutes ago, we were debating about hate that we see in the United States of America right now, and discrimination, and how it's sort of being okay to hate people and discriminate against them just because they don't look like we look, or talk like we talk, or maybe have not of the same religion, or no religion. that's just wrong. We're American citizens. We were established as a country of a lot of freedom. So been focusing on that and many other issues. It's been great.
Now you grew up in North Carolina, right?
Yes, I did.
And you know, you think of North Carolina, you go back. We did a civil rights tour through North Carolina, South Carolina, through much of the South. You know, I'm sure when you were younger, you know, we had a lot of racial tensions.
Clearly.
Is it disheartening, angering, scary that it seems like we're almost back to those moments?
It's frightening to me. It's frightening. Yes, North Carolina. I grew up in the 50s and in the 60s, and I would say North Carolina was a little more progressive than some other states in the South. Terry Sanford was elected governor in 1960, while other Southern Democratic governors were not making the moves to integrate schools. Terry Sanford started that process and was moving more aggressively with it. But now I'm seeing, the hatred, the racism. I'm a strong activist with Reverend Barber and the Moral Monday movement and the moral movement period that he's leading all over this country that I enjoy very much and I want to be active and a part of. But yeah, I'm seeing things change.
Yeah, it's amazing. We're living in very interesting times, and I'm thinking about the fact that there are no politicos here. Is this a signal that the labor movement is maybe pulling back a little bit from politics? Maybe sending a message to Democrats, maybe even sending a message to Republicans? Because look, I remember, and I'm not that old, I don't think, but I remember when there were pro-labor Republicans, when labor wasn't a partisan issue where we were beating each other up over. We all want good wages, good conditions, good jobs.
I think we are sending a message that we are for pro-worker politicians. Doesn't matter whether you're a Democrat, Republican, or an independent. Are you a pro-worker politician? Do you believe in collective bargaining? The best way to raise wages in this country is to have a contract and collective bargaining. The best way to have rights in the workplace is through having a union. All of those will help the economy, that will help raise wages. It's not just raising the minimum wage that will deal with wages. The best way to have improved wages is by collective bargaining.
Let me ask you, the one thing that we see this convention is it's been lingering in the air. The Supreme Court case is coming up, Janus versus AFSCME.
Yes.
There are people who are looking at it's Armageddon next year when this case goes through, and ultimately I believe is going to be decided the wrong way with Neil Gorsuch as the stolen seat. Your union, the federal government's employees union, you're already in this world. I mean, you don't have fair share. You have to go out and re-up members every year, right?
We organize every day of our lives, 365 days a year in AFGE. We're recruiting, asking people to join our union. We don't have the fair share. We should have it, but we don't have it. But this decision, it will affect the entire labor movement. AFGE has as much invested in this Supreme Court decision as AFSCME, as American Federation of Teachers, of all the unions. This is an attack upon the labor movement, and so an injury to one is an injury to all. And yeah, we've lived in an open shop world, but at the same token, when you come and attack our brothers and sisters, you are attacking AFGE, and we're going to be standing in solidarity. But I am not afraid of open shops, because people want to have a union. People want a voice in the workplace, and the only way they get that is through having a union. An employer is just not going to automatically love you that good and take that great a care of you. I don't care if it's the federal government, if it's a mom and pop shop, whoever it is, city government, the school system, transit company. If you got a boss, you need a union. That's just the way I feel about it.
It's a simple, I mean, it's almost something we could put on a bumper sticker.
That's right. Clearly, we ought to have it on a bumper sticker. But if you've got a boss, you need a union. The only way we are going to have increased wages, increased worker rights in this country, and everyone, a thriving middle class and working class. And I use the term working class a lot more than I use the middle class anymore, because I believe we're about working people. And the only way we're going to get there is through having a union and the labor movement. And it's not always going to be the traditional arrangements that we've seen in the past. We proved that with TSA, who
Right.
didn't have collective bargaining. But yeah, we went out, asked them to be a part of our union, worked in that, got them collective bargaining 10 years after the fact, but at the same token, they didn't have it by law, but that didn't scare us off. They still wanted to form and join a union without the typical union structure.
And I've heard you talk about this in the past, where we brought back and we took over the screening and all. And look, everybody, honestly, nobody's thrilled with TSA and the screening and all that, but it's not their fault. It's the policy. But you've talked about how they were brought in, they had no rights, they were making far less than anybody else in government, and they worse benefits, and really the redheaded stepchild, if I remember the
Yeah,
exact
I've
quote.
used that term frequently. It's a Southern term,
Right.
probably.
No, it's all over. But you took those members, you got them together, and together they were able to fight for better wages, better hours, better conditions.
That's right, and I mean, we've got better working conditions. Everything's not perfect yet, but we continue to make improvements through our legislative collective effort, because we have to bargain with Congress for wages and benefits. We don't get to go sit at the bargaining table and do that. We certainly have been able to work to try to improve their wages and other benefits of employment. And if you remember back a little over a year ago, we were expecting these long TSA lines. It was our members that devised various ways and methods and means and stepped up to the plate and said, look, the workers know how to get this work done, and those lines didn't materialize. And the one thing that I take great pride in, not from me, not just from AFGE, but from our members, since 9/11, and government now does what government should have always been doing. We have not had any incidents
Nope.
Of terrorism, hijacking, or things that create havoc with the American people, and it's because of AFG members that we are all flying safely in our country and around the world.
Now, good on them. Last question I've got for you, last line, because I have to ask about it. The attack on the VA. We know that there's a movement in this country that wants to privatize, wants to use what I would argue is a created crisis. I understand there's some 40,000 plus vacancies in the VA. So all of these complaints that I see from people, it appears to me that this is a created crisis. And I'm curious your view on it.
A completely created crisis, and these numbers are the Secretary, Dr. David Shulkin's numbers, not my numbers. He has used from 41 to 45 to 49,000 vacancies, and get this clearly understood, this is vacancies. The Congress of the United States has wrote the check, put the money into the VA's bank account. There's no further need for appropriations. The money's there, and said, go hire. What employer in this country that had the ability to go hire 45,000 new workers with money in the bank wouldn't want to do that?
Absolutely.
I mean, so I keep saying, Mr. Secretary, why are you not filling those vacancies? And I do understand perhaps finding a neurosurgeon in Cheyenne, Wyoming may be a little difficult, but we're talking about a healthcare system that is from coast to coast, border to border, and yes, is in Hawaii and in Puerto Rico. And it's not just doctors and nurses. There's nursing assistants, there's the support people, there's many professionals that have to come with certain unique skills, but then there are many people that's on the job training, the administrative folks. Somebody has to maintain the environment, somebody has to maintain the physical plant of the VA Medical Center. You've got to have the HR people to recruit, to process these folks. So it's not just 45,000 vacancies of doctors and nurses, it's all of that structure that supports hiring doctors and nurses as well as others. He's got the money in the bank. He needs to hire those people. He needs to be given Congress a weekly or no less than monthly update, as Congressman Anthony Brown has proposed, how many vacancies, what he's doing to fill them. And the one thing I would say today, AFGE appeals to the Secretary of the Department of Veterans Affairs. We want to help him to recruit and retain those employees. I was recruited by another VA nurse. I've recruited other nurses to go to work at the VA. We're identifying the problem. We want to help him and work in great partnership with him to fix that problem. Mr. Secretary, AFGE is ready to help you to recruit those people to come work and care for the men and women that have borne the battle for this country.
Yeah, if he's not going to do it, you will.
We'll be glad to.
But
That's
maybe,
right.
maybe
he's got the money. We'll do anything in our power to get people to come to work and tell them, number one, it's a great place to work, and it's the most noble mission in the world.
Yeah, maybe we should tell them, not so much on the 10-day river cruise down the Thames with your wife and your staff. Maybe come back and do your job.
That's exactly right.
Let's
get focused on, out there every day. I'm ready to go to any VA medical center with him to talk about what can we do to get staff through the door from growing our own, not just the short-term plan, but a long-range plan, but not to increase contracting out and privatization. Veterans don't want that. The VFW recently did a survey. 92% of every veteran in this country says, I want my care at the VA by VA employees.
Good stuff. J. David Cox, I appreciate the time.
Thank
great
you
talking
so
with you.
much.
Always great.
Always great to be with you.
True advocate and champion for our veterans. I'd love to hear what you have to say. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com, or shoot us a line here at Twitter. Right back.
Hey, great.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Check out our website, thericksmithshow.com. So while we're here at the AFL-CIO's convention, they debating tons of resolutions, passing a bunch of things. One of them that came up is the idea of meaningful criminal justice reform. And you go, what does that mean? Well, it means maybe we won't be the number 1 or number 2 country in the world locking up our people. And here to come and talk a little bit about it, I've asked Eric Young. He's the president of the AFGE Bureau of Prisons. Eric, thanks for taking time for us.
Oh, thank you, Rick. I appreciate it.
Explain this to me. What does meaningful criminal justice reform mean?
Well, meaningful criminal justice reform means having taken maintenance to the draconian mandatory minimum prison sentences that was actually imposed in the early 80s and 90s, actually, that it resulted in tripling of the inmate population in the Bureau of Prisons. Actually, the population in the Bureau of Prisons actually went up from 55,000 to over 219,000 at its peak during the last 20 years.
So let me ask you this. I mean, you're advocating to go backward, and which is the right thing. And I'm not. But you're the president of the workers who work in those prisons. Doesn't it seem like a kind of a mixed kind of theory? Because you're going to lose members doing the right thing.
Well, and that's the moral issue, and that's when moral practicality come into place. Unfortunately, yes, it's not popular for me being a person who actually is employed as a result of the incarceration of inmates, but that's because of our work is inherently governmental. But when we think about it morally, is it responsible for our country, particularly our government, to impose laws that result in the incarceration of multiple people for first-time nonviolent offenses? I believe that is where the moral road actually comes to a hedge. And it's responsible for me to be able to explain that to our members, that we can't continue to operate in the same circumstance that we've been operating in, where we're pushing inmates into places in the prisons that weren't meant for their housing and for their managing and for the maintaining the safety and security of the prisons. So
and the guards.
And also absolutely of the workers, but also of the inmates. That's one of our primary missions, is to provide a humane environment for inmates to be rehabilitated in. And how can you do that when the prison population is bursting at the seams, and also with violence as well?
And you talk about our sentencing and locking all these people up as being immoral. One of the other parts of our justice system being just as, I would argue, just as immoral is this whole push to private prisons. So not only are we making sentences longer and mandating certain sentences, we're now making it for profit. And I got to be honest, I find that deplorable.
I think, and I agree with you. I second that. Well, we're here, Robert Rules. I just think that we are in America, the greatest nation in the world, the most richest nation in the world. That is some work that is inherently governmental, and some things that actually diminishes our standing in a moral authority in the world with other countries, knowing that we incarcerate over 2 million people now in this country, spending at the tunes of $70 billion annually. We have to decide and take a step back to think whether or not that is appropriate to continue to spend that kind of resource on the incarceration of people, and to know that we have invested in private prisons to make sure that they're able to maintain a minimum level of inmates in their facilities for profit, and know that that is on our stock market is actually abhorrent.
Yeah, I mean, if you read some of these contracts, and we've talked about this on the program for years, that there's a minimum occupancy number. I mean, be it 80, 90%. Name me a hotel in this country wouldn't want 80 or 90% occupancy.
I'm sure all of them would, but also too, if we could actually pay private prisons for not even maintaining their dedicated amount of inmates population, imagine those resources back in our prisons that could actually provide for a more safer and humane environment for our workers and also for the inmates, for us to be able to do our jobs. I just think that is absolutely despicable that we would advocate for the incarceration and have people actually lobbying on the Hill to incarcerate more people in America. It's just not moral.
It's amazing to me, but you know, the other part of this, and I talk about this often as well, is the fact that it costs more to incarcerate somebody than it does to educate them.
Absolutely, and I spoke about that yesterday here on the AFL floor. I stated that $70 billion a year at the tune of, on average, a per capita of $30,000 per inmate, based on the security level of a prison, that we would find it not a problem to invest in the incarceration of inmates, taking care of an inmate at $30,000 per inmate in the state, from the municipality to the state to the federal level, and to know that we won't even provide that kind of level of income to assist the least of these.
And to make sure that they don't get there.
Absolutely.
I mean, it kind of takes me back to the pay me now or pay me later.
Absolutely.
Or pay me a lot later. But I guess again it comes back to the private product. And here's my other problem. We're privatizing education while we already privatized prisons. It just seems like there's a perverse incentive on both sides, because we're going to be able to take educations and profit from it, and when they can't get jobs, folks can't make it in the economy, we're going to lock them up, and well, the profiteers win on both ends.
Absolutely.
Or is that conspiratorial?
You know what, I really don't know, but I could tell you everything is not meant to make money off of. I truly believe that taking money out of the public school system is no different than taking money out of the government to actually incarcerate people in private prisons. You know, we have to have a moral discussion, a roundtable discussion with the right people to decide whether or not this is the way that we want to go as a nation, as the moral authority in the world. I just think that we have our, you know, our ducks not in a row.
Yeah.
If you ask me.
We see all the time, you know, right now, fortunately, we're starting to see the conversation around banning the box.
Yes.
And that's if you've done something wrong, you've paid your debt to society, it shouldn't follow you to the grave. It seems sane, it seems logical. I'm curious where you guys are on that.
Well, you know, Senator Cory Booker reached out to our organization. He and Rand Paul, the junior senator in Kentucky, actually sponsored that legislation together to have a most conservative member of Congress and have a new junior senator actually in the state of New Jersey actually coming forth to basically, that just sets a tone. But if you really think about the ban the box, if inmates are serving their debt to society in the prison and they're paying their debt and we are rehabilitating them so they could go back out and become law-abiding citizens, why would America have any problem with anyone being released out into the community and trying to earn a dignity of work and a decent livelihood, to earn meaningful housing, and you know, to be able to go back and take care of their family? I don't think that is our job as government, or even allow private employers to actually discriminate against those who've actually paid their debt to society. So ban the box should not be an issue for any of my folks, but also for the American people.
Yeah, I mean, because we keep hearing about recidivism rates.
Yes.
And it seems to me that if you get out of jail and you can't find a job, there's only really one other way for you to feed yourself, and that's to, well, probably end yourself back up in prison.
To go back in ill-gotten gain. And I spoke on this also too this week from a personal perspective, you know, I have family members that was actually incarcerated. My mother was a substance abuse and also resulted in becoming a ward of the state. Also, I had all of my younger brothers. I was actually one choice away from probably becoming a ward of the state myself, and many other Americans as well. But by the grace of God, the Army and the U.S. government, I've been able to become a productive citizen. I truly believe that my brothers and my family wanted to try to take care of their kids. And I want to truly believe that I know that they were trying to find a dignity of work, to be able to take care of their own, and to constantly be discriminated against because of their past, and you know, to get out into society and have continual roadblocks and hurdles put up in front of you. That result in a lot of recidivation in our country, and that's primarily the reason why we have the high number of incarcerated people in this country. You know, you get out, you expect that you've done your job, you're paid your dues to society and paid your just debt, yet you wind back up in prison because you want to try to find some measure of work, whether or not it's illegal or meaningful, to try to take care of your family. And unfortunately, our system, the way that we have it set up, it is actually a revolving door for many prisoners that are actually released.
I tell my kids, it's that first mistake. Make lots of mistakes, but don't make big ones.
Exactly.
Because in this day and age, it follows you to the day you die. And this is where I'm on the ban the box bandwagon. Because, you know, if you have to check that box, you're never going to get that job. And you're constantly in this fight to just make it to tomorrow. So let me ask you, in your experience, what would have helped your brothers? What would have helped your family members to, you know, maybe not get into that trouble? Or is it just so big and such a societal problem that you know, maybe one person, one thought can't fix it?
I don't want to believe in this great nation that we have that we can't undo some wrongs. I truly believe that mandatory minimum served a purpose at the time of the high crime wave in the 80s, where we had a lot of violence and drug problems in this country. However, we have to decide whether or not the use of those draconian mandatory minimum prison sentences are worth keeping in place today, because actually they've actually run their course and actually have destroyed what we all hold dear, the American family. And that is primarily the reason why I was affected. Not having a mother raise me and a father raise me in my home was primarily because of these type of policies that America have in place. So I want to believe that these laws have such an adverse collateral damage on the family structure and a family unit in America, and obviously you will continue to see the problems of the juvenile delinquency, the truancy in the schools. It's because you have children raising children, and everything that we hold dear of wanting to have a mother and father in the home to raise the children is actually not as easy as one meet the eye.
Yeah, I would argue a lot of that has to do with also our policy, because I remember growing up in the 70s, and you know, if you were on welfare, you know, I grew up in a housing project on the west side of Cleveland, where I was the minority, and I remember there being days where the welfare inspector would come and visit the houses back when they did that, and the men were scurrying out the back door because there was a policy that if it was aid to dependent children, and women got money to feed their children, but there could be no men in the house. And it just seemed to me that, you know, as I grew up, that was really a destructive policy. And I would argue that that's part of why the poverty communities, both white and black, are broken up.
And I'm going to say this to you as well. I don't believe there's not one person in America that want to be poor, that want to stand in a welfare line. Even as a child, when I used to stand in a line with my mother when she was raising me, it was embarrassing to know that we had to have
clown money
hand you some money to be able to feed your children. I truly believe that welfare is just a stepping stone that allows somebody the opportunity to be able to do something in the interim, and should not be a permanent fix. But you know, I just truly don't believe that a working man, and particularly in America, we do have a working class in this country that basically take care of this country, that's built this country. Truly believe that nobody is actually sitting back waiting for a welfare check. as one mostly tried to portray in the news.
Yeah, no, I grew up in an area, we weren't on the bus line, so finding those jobs were hard to get.
Absolutely.
And I've always grown up, because look, I remember the embarrassment of taking the clown money to the store and really being embarrassed by it.
Yeah.
Everyone wanted jobs, and I've always been a believer of no handouts, give me a job.
Absolutely.
And if the private sector cannot or will not create enough jobs, this is where government should have to step in my view.
And temporarily, as you know, and you know, we believe, and we're Christians. You know, and the minority, people of color, the great majority of us are very religious. And one of the biblical scriptures that are in the Bible is that a man don't work, don't eat. You know, so we hold that dear, and we don't want people to try to look down and frown upon people. And that's the reason why even me, as now a professional that actually is a national president, oversee over 39,000 people, I don't even look down upon a man who've actually made a wrong decision in a prison. You know, it's our job. We have a role, we have a responsibility to rehabilitate others, to assist others so they could be, law-abiding citizens. And I do want to say this. If we could actually invest in the reentry of inmates inside a prison, how come we cannot invest in the progress of our citizens so that they don't have to go to prison to actually earn and learn a dignity of work? I just think that we have our moral principles backwards.
Our priorities are wrong, but I would argue has everything to do with that profit motive.
Absolutely.
Eric, I appreciate the time. Really great talking with you. Thanks so much.
I appreciate it.
Love to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Quick break, right back here from the AFL-CIO's convention.
Thank you, Rick.
Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Breaking urgent news here from the AFL-CIO's convention. As we speak in Congress, they're about ready to, well, stick it to veterans, stick it to consumers. They're going after the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau and the protections against these things that I've been talking about for a very long time, these arbitration clauses. And here to talk a little bit about it, I've asked Will from Vote Vets. Will, thanks for taking time for us.
Well, you almost had it. The other Will's Vote Vet, but I'm glad to be here too. I'm with the Union Veterans Council. So.
I messed that up. You put it in my head. I'm so ticked off that my mind is full of this arbitration thing. What's going on right now?
So it's just another great example of the rigged system where money is controlling politics, and there's no regard for consumers and the average working class American. There's this little clause called forced arbitration that financial institutions use in loans and
most
mortgages.
of us know cell phone contracts.
Exactly. So it's usually on about page 45 in very small print, and it says, if we mess up and we do something illegal to you, you're not going to be able to sue us. You're going to have to go to forced arbitration, where us as the financial institution pays for the arbitrator, picks the arbitrator, and wins at about a 97% rate. So it is a complete rigged system. It's a rip-off clause. It's atrocious. And right now, senators are prepping to vote to pass it, to take protections that the CFPB put in effect that says this is wrong, this is un-American, this is not democracy as we know it.
So help me with this. So the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, passed under Dodd-Frank, put this piece of policy into place.
Yes, sir.
That says you can no longer stick these into what? Is it just banking?
This
is it just mortgages, payday lending? Give me the bottom.
All of the above. Let's look at Equifax and Wells Fargo. They all, you think there's 163 million people affected by Equifax. They're all under forced arbitration clauses. When you look at Wells Fargo, how they're creating millions of bank accounts, fake bank accounts, they're all under forced arbitration. So nobody affected by that, if you're a veteran, if you're just a regular American, will be able to sue and recoup any of their monies. And what's so wrong is that this strictly, it really affects veterans. Veterans have historically been targeted by unscrupulous lenders, financial institutions that take advantage of them. You could be deployed, you might be without a phone or computer access for 3 months, and you come home and you realize your house is gone, it's been repossessed. Well, this is the thing, there's rules that protect veterans about that, but the rules can only be enforced if they go to court. And with these forced arbitration clauses, It's canceling out the rules that protect our
How's
veterans.
that possible? How is that possibly? I mean, just not. You know, how's that possibly legal? How's that possibly moral? How is it possible that these politicians who wrap their arms around veterans like you would say, you know, we love you, you're our heroes? How in the hell can that happen?
It's mind blowing to me. It's not how my mom raised me, and that's the saddest part about it. And we see it. Last year alone, there was 19,000 cases of financial fraud against veteran service members. 19,000. And without the CFPB rules, they wouldn't have been able to do anything about it. We have veterans that lost houses, cars, millions of them, millions of dollars worth of, and they never were able to recoup that because of these clauses. And to think that Republican senators right now are getting ready to slash these protections that has helped fix the system. The system's gotten a little bit better lately. The banks have started to improve, but it's because of the CFPB. It's because of these rules. And they're saying, now we're going to take rid of these rules that we actually put in place. So what I don't understand is, are they just going to try and do it again when the next war happens? When when the white-haired men send the next group of 18-year-old kids over to fight in some foreign country, and they start being targeted by financial institutions, what are we going to do then? They won't have a rule to protect them.
I mean, one of the things, and this is not a new problem. You know, we were talking about this years ago, you know, right at the beginning of Afghanistan and Iraq, because we were hearing of people losing their security clearances because they had taken out payday loans that had gotten so big that the concern was you basically have a loan shark with a chit over top of a serviceman who could possibly be compromised, blackmailed. So national security, we were afraid.
Yeah,
and I guess the other part of this is, why doesn't the military do something about this? Why isn't there a loan program through the military? Why? I mean, honestly, on a large scale, it makes no sense to me why you would allow that to happen.
Yeah, it really doesn't. Every single major VSO has came out against this bill. Every veterans organization has said this is a bad bill. It hurts not only our veterans, it hurts our military readiness, because this affects morale. It affects the financial stability of our veterans while they're fighting for our country. The number 2 reason veterans commit suicide is financial instability. This will lead to people losing their houses, people losing their cars while they're deployed in the next war, maybe in Northern Africa, maybe in Korea. And we're going to see people die because of this bill. And people don't realize how much that affects. And that's not hyperbole, it's the reality of it.
No, I mean, here's the thing. I mean, you look at all of these arbitration clauses, and they're in everything right now. And you rarely have a choice. Whether you look at employment, which we've talked about on the program quite often, whether it's a cell phone bill or a loan, yet our Supreme Court has deemed class action lawsuits against these kind of things not allowed. And it just seems like the little guy's always getting dumped on. The little guy's always being abused, be it a serviceman, be it a citizen, be it anybody. It seems like the little guy's getting screwed.
Exactly. And you know, this is blatantly un-American. This is an un-American act. It's an un-American bill. It takes the power away from the people and gives it to greedy CEOs and corporations that want to take advantage of the system.
So what do we do?
What you can do right now is you can make a phone call. You can get on Twitter. You can use the hashtag ripoff clause. Tell your senator, whoever they are, that you do not support Resolution 47. Tell them it's an un-American bill. It's bad for veterans, and we don't want it to pass.
Real simple. Will, I appreciate the time.
Thanks so much.
Great work you guys do there at the Union Veterans Council. Thanks so
problem.
much. Call your senator. Call often. There's not much time. Tell them no. Vote no on the ripoff clause. Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show here at the AFL-CIO's convention in St. Louis. I'm sitting here with Holly Salamito. She's the president of the AFG local that represents HUD workers. And as you know, we've been talking about Ben Carson and the anti-housing policies that have been coming out of him. And again, it's one of those things that you go, really, you're going to put someone in charge of an agency who is vehemently opposed to the agency, the missions agency, but not surprising with this administration, top to bottom. You can see that. Betsy DeVos at Education, Scott Pruitt with EPA, the list goes on. Holly, thanks for taking time for us.
Absolutely, glad to be here.
So, I look at this, putting Ben Carson, a guy who admitted he was not in favor of the mission of the agency, in charge of the agency. How bad has it been?
It hasn't been good. Under this administration, first of all, we've seen some really strong anti-union sentiment. I've been with HUD almost 20 years, through a few administrations, and the union has always been invited to meet with the new secretary to give our perspective, tell the new secretary a little bit about the agency. This is the first time that didn't happen. Dr. Carson had no interest in meeting with the union, and I still haven't met him.
Really? Now, he did have a meeting with some of the employees, and it made some kind of news, didn't it, if I remember correctly?
Well, I don't know who those employees were. I can tell you that all we have seen is that the administration has set up an electronic suggestion box where they basically collect anecdotal information, and they're relying on anecdotes from, I don't know which employees are providing information, and they're using that to formulate their, quote, reform plan for the agency.
And how bad is that reform plan going to be?
They won't provide us with the reform plan.
Well, we don't know yet.
They submitted it to OMB. We've repeatedly asked for it, and all we get is the runaround and a lot of gobbledygook saying, oh, well, it's not final, but we know they're working on it, we know they're making plans, and they won't provide us with any information.
And what's that going to mean for people who need the housing assistance? Because look, at the end of it, bad policy comes down to bad housing policy to actual people who are going to be in need.
Well, judging from the town halls that have been conducted, the first town hall where Dr. Carson introduced himself to employees, he spent about 45 minutes talking about himself, talking about the surgery that he had performed and his life story, much of the material that you hear on the speaking tours that he's done around the country. He didn't seem to know much about housing.
He gives a nice speech about himself, I'll give him that.
He does give a nice speech, and he's a personable guy. He has a great sense of humor. But he didn't seem to know much about the agency or what it did, and as I said, he doesn't seem to have any systemic approach to getting the information that he needs to determine how to best deliver services.
Right.
For example, there has never been, in the last few years, a thorough workload analysis done at HUD that would show the people who are making decisions about HUD reform how services are delivered, how much work individual employees have. We have employees in certain field offices that are managing hundreds of projects, multifamily projects, and in other field offices, there are people who only have 50 projects.
Only 50?
Only 50. But what I'm saying is, before you reform, you have to have some kind of data or analysis or some basis for planning your reform.
Right.
And from what we've seen, the people who are at the top really don't seem to know what they're doing.
But admittedly, they don't know what they're doing. And isn't that what we were told why he was going to be so good at this? He doesn't know. He doesn't have the entrenched institutional knowledge that he's going to come at it from a different perspective, and he's going to, well, bring us new ideas.
Well, what we hear from him again at these town halls is a lot of rhetoric, a lot of theory, and talk about the American dream and how he's going to somehow rebuild communities, but there are no specifics and there's no real plan.
That seems a lot like what comes out of the Trump administration. But I want to come back to this because I think it's really important that, in the past we've always had people in positions, or at least it's my view, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, that at least the people who are the head of these agencies had some attachment to the agency, their mission, so to speak. Like, I would want somebody who's dealing with housing to know something about housing other than how to walk in through a front door.
That would be a reasonable expectation.
Yeah, I mean, because I would want that because I want people to actually pursue the mission. So I guess this is an opinion question. How much do you think putting Ben Carson in charge of that was really just a destructive thing, much like Scott Pruitt at EPA or Betsy DeVos at Education?
I don't think it reflects on the part of this administration, I don't think it reflects any real interest in taking care of the most vulnerable populations, and that's the population that we serve at HUD. We serve poor people. So it's a statement, and we can only hope that Congress is watching what's going on and is going to put the brakes on some of the plans.
But I think you just said what the problem really is. You deal with poor people.
Exactly.
And I got to be honest, and this is a personal opinion, again, you don't have to agree, but it doesn't seem like this Congress and this president and this administration seems to really care much about those people. In fact, they seem to almost be the enemy.
I don't see any interest on the part of the administration leaders who have been put in place at HUD. I don't see any real interest in our mission, in poor people, or the employees that accomplish that mission.
So let me ask you on the human side of this, because there is a human side to this, as we said a minute ago. What happens to all these people when and if they successfully destroy? And look, I'm sure there are problems at HUD. I'm sure there are things we could do much better. I just don't know that I view anything coming out of them as something positive, and it's going to harm people.
People fall through the safety net. Obviously, housing is an essential service. People lose their housing. People have no place to live. A lot of things fall apart, so this could be very bad. I mean,
because we can have an argument whether housing projects are a good thing or a bad thing, because you guys kind of deal with housing projects, right?
That's one of the things we do. We do a lot of different things. We increase affordable housing so that middle-income people have access to housing. HUD runs a very large insurance program that makes mortgage financing available to people who are trying to buy homes, usually people who are underserved in the regular loan market. HUD gives grants to develop communities and make communities strong so that people have opportunities and children have safe communities to live in. So the mission of the agency is actually very broad, but again, we serve the most vulnerable communities in our society, and we serve poor people.
Yeah, I mean, I grew up in a housing project on the west side of Cleveland, and to be honest, I'm not a huge fan of them, but at least it was housing. Homelessness and poverty and those things were real in my world back then, but at least we had shelter there. There are a lot of things that we could do better, and I would love to see us move forward in a positive way. I just don't, again, I keep coming back to this. I just don't think this administration is in the same mind as I am. So what can we do to help? What can I do? What can our viewers do? What can we possibly do to correct this? Or is it almost hopeless at this point?
I think that the best thing that your viewership can, or your listeners can do, is to be calling their representatives, their House of Representatives, local offices, call their senators, and make their wishes known. We have seen some of the legislators pull back a bit on some of the budget cuts that have been submitted by this new administration. So they need to be talking to their elected representatives and saying that these programs need to be saved and that HUD is important and HUD builds strong communities, and that they should vote against any cuts to HUD's budget.
Now, are there cuts coming? I mean, the skinny budget was horrible for everybody. How bad was it for HUD?
The skinny budget was very bad, but some of it changed when it went to Congress. It was a lot better. And part of that, I think, is due to people making legislators aware of all of the good work that HUD does and how important it is. So I would say that it's very important for people to be taking political action at this point in time, because that's the only thing that we see making a difference.
Yeah. Holly, I appreciate the time. Thank you so much, and please continue the great work you do.
Thank you so much.
Love to hear your thoughts. Email me, rick@thericksmithshow.com. Also, active. Got to get active. Call your representatives. All of my housing activist friends, now's the time to activate. Quick break. Back here from the AFL-CIO convention. Welcome back to the Rick Smith Show. Our coverage of the AFL-CIO's convention in St. Louis continues. I'm sitting here with Rick Bloomingdale. He's president of the Pennsylvania AFL-CIO. Rick, thanks for taking time for us.
Rick, always a pleasure to be on the show.
So you just got off the stage talking about NAFTA renegotiations, TPP, how labor won that, how we won that. Tell me a little bit.
Well, it was 4 other state Fed presidents, including myself and the president of the CWA, Chris Shelton, Tim Berger from Ohio, Ron Bieber from Michigan, Phil Neuenfeld from Wisconsin, and Tim Berger from Ohio. We basically had a lot of shared experiences. where on TPP, we really got the public engaged, right? We talked about how this impacted them. And I remember back to the NAFTA fight, you didn't have every union engaged because not every union understood how trade impacted them. This time, we took a lot of time to educate and explain and get our members on board. For instance, my union, AFSCME, our members don't always understand the connection between trade and their jobs.
Right.
But when you have a steel worker who was making $30 an hour lose his job to Mexico, or her job to Mexico, and now is making $10 an hour, that's less money in property taxes, wage taxes, in money to negotiate contracts, repair infrastructure, lift the community up. So this time with TPP, we really took the time to connect all the dots with all the unions. And as a matter of fact, Lee Saunders, the president of AFSCME International, was one of the leading voices against TPP, which shocked President Obama, who said, I underestimated the power of the labor movement. He told Rich Trumka that. He said, I just underestimated what you guys were able to do. And it was because of solidarity that we really brought everybody together. And, unlike NAFTA, where it was a kind of a leadership thing, we really got the grassroots involved. We had the experience of NAFTA, right? NAFTA was the first multi-country trade deal. We had a lot of bilateral and single trade deals. NAFTA was the first trade deal that really crushed jobs, and so we had a lot of experience and a lot of examples to learn off of. And we took the time to educate the members who hadn't been impacted by NAFTA with members who had been impacted by NAFTA. We made sure that we were helping to connect the dots. So when push came to shove, our members were ready. City councils, townships, everybody in Pennsylvania was ready to fight. And I think we ended up, they never had the vote, but I think we had a lot of people ready to vote against TPP. And as a result, we pretty much killed it, and all Trump did was sign a death certificate, but it was dead by the time
it was dead. You're right, it was dead by the time. But he picked up that rhetoric. He did such a good job, I think, that he took it and made it his own. And I talk to union members all the time who, they look at the Hillary camp and they weren't so sure she was against it. Now she came out and stated it, but there was this kind of, I'm not so sure she really is against it. Because Obama did it to us too.
Right.
I mean, I sat 20 feet from him at your convention where he said, you can trust me.
Yeah.
We're not getting Chorus, we're not getting Colombia, we're not getting Panama. And we got Chorus, Colombia, and Panama, and the mother of all TPP.
Right, and sometimes you wonder what happens to some of these folks when they get into the White House. It's almost like there's some kind of fume or something that causes them to become these free traders rather than fair traders. Every other industrial country in the world puts their workers in the trade negotiations. Only in America do we leave the workers out and do intellectual property, capital, investments, all that kind of stuff. We leave the workers out. Every other country in the world keeps their workers in as part of the negotiations, which is why our wages are lower than strong union countries like Germany and Japan and places where we have trade. They have trade deals, but because they make sure worker protections are in there. But no, you're right. In the campaign, Secretary Clinton, as Obama's Secretary of State, she had some say in it and made some remarks about it. And not understanding the frustration and anger that had come out of NAFTA, right? And it's not like we stopped talking about NAFTA. We've been talking to it since it was signed.
Sure.
And we were proven right about it. It took away more jobs than it created. It took away more good-paying jobs than it created. It created a lot of low-wage jobs. It didn't create a lot of high-paying jobs.
Which is why we see this almost idealized, romanticized, wanting back of manufacturing, because those were good-paying union jobs that supported families.
Well, you had a key word in there: union jobs. Manufacturing is not necessarily high-paying unless it's union.
Right. No, I agree.
All you got to do is look at the South and see where manufacturing has taken off. BMW, Mercedes, you can pick them. The ones that aren't union, the wages are crap. The ones that are union, the wages are good. So, this, again, as you mentioned, romanticized version of, or vision that manufacturing, let's bring back the family-sustaining jobs, right, is what the other party, the Republicans, call them, and the Democrats. But what they really are is the ones that are good paying are the ones that are union. And that leads us into another part of the convention, which is about organizing. We can't let these folks start up these manufacturing plants and pay people crappy wages, right? We got to lift up the standards by organizing these workers and helping them get a voice at the table to make sure when that company's making billions of dollars, some of that money's going into their pockets, not just the shareholders.
You got to figure out how to share the wealth, and that's where you guys come in. Because look, and I was listening to someone speak just a little while ago, who was saying, the only way we raise wages is by organizing.
Right.
No benevolent corporation is going to go here. We're going to give you this because we like you. It has to be fought for. It has to be won.
Exactly right. Nobody has ever given the labor movement anything. Anybody who has a 40-hour work week, all the things we talk about,
right,
all that came through a lot of blood, sweat, and tears. And there was a time when, now they hit us with lawyers. Back then they hit us with clubs. And it's a different world now, but we still got to organize, because you're right. No corporation. I mean, I'm sure there are some that are few and far between, but for the most part, they're trying to deliver shareholder value. They're trying to give money to their shareholders, not to their workers. They'll cheat the workers every chance they get.
Yeah.
And we've seen it time and time again with Amazon and all these, quote, new technological companies that were supposed to be better to their employees, right? They're just as bad. They're sweatshops, just like the old garment shops.
Well, what I've been saying is we're moving into the next type of industrial revolution. We're moving into the brave new world, and the vision is it's without unions.
Right.
And legally, what we're seeing coming out of Washington, D.C., out of where you're at in Harrisburg, is taking away any tools for working people to be able to get those wages, those better conditions, those benefits. So the question is in this, what we know is coming in the post-Janus world, what are you guys planning on doing as another arrow is slung in your direction, as another paper cut comes? What's the response in the post-Janus world?
Well, I think you're seeing our public sector unions step up, and we at the state Fed are stepping up as well to try to, the big unions that are public sector unions, AFSCME, SEIU, PFT, they are getting ready for Janus. They're doing a lot of member-to-member education. We have a lot of unions that have smaller public sector units that have not been able to get geared up towards. So we're trying to help, because a lot of this is just reconnecting with your members, right? It's the thing we should have been doing in 2016, which is talking to our members and listening to our members about what's important to them. I've been around AFSCME long enough that, I was in when it was right to work for public sector workers in AFSCME. We didn't get agency shop till 1988. Before that, you could drop it in and out of the union when the contract was up, but we had freeloaders. We had people who accepted the union services, accepted the raises, accepted the health care that they negotiated, and wouldn't pay a cent in dues. And it did undermine the union. Now, it also, and the employers were able to use that to divide the workers. Hey, look, he got the same raise, he's not paying dues. Why don't you drop out? And those kind of divisiveness and pitting workers against workers, that's what they're good at, which is why agency shop was so important, because it took an arrow out of their quiver, right? They couldn't divide because everybody paid a little to get the benefits of the union, whether you paid full dues or you paid the agency fee, which was 80–85%. Everybody paid something for the contract, for the health care, for the negotiations of the pension, and processing the grievances and fighting the boss when he tried to take advantage of you. So but in the South, they've been fighting right to work, and they're organizing. So look, this isn't going to it's not going to get rid of unions. It'll certainly weaken us financially for a little while, but I think as we get stronger, like they are in Iowa, AFSCME is, they took away dues deduction. They're out there using, those credit card machines, Square or whatever they use on their iPhones or whatever cell phone they have. They're using that to sign people up, like, let's take it out of your credit card. So, there are ways to do it because people are committed to fairness and justice, and they're going to have a union. We will not let them take our unions away. They may hit us with some financial issues, but they won't take our ability to fight injustice away from us.
Last question I've got for you, last line of questioning. Pennsylvania is going to be an interesting state next year. You've got a Senate race, you've got a gubernatorial race. There are some who are predicting Pennsylvania is going to be the next right-to-work state. I'm curious your thoughts on the direction of the state.
Well, we certainly have our work cut out for us. Governor Wolf is going to be in a tough fight against the right-to-work Senator Scott Wagner.
Or as I call him, Baby Trump.
Baby Trump. And as well as, you know, the guy who has made his name on treating immigrant residents horribly in his town of Hazleton. You know, he's running against Bob Casey, so Senator Casey's going to have a tough re-election because, you know, turnout's going to be lower than it is in a presidential year.
And I would argue that Donald Trump's going to be a resident of Pennsylvania.
Well,
and a lot of union members did vote for him.
They did, but not all of them. Maybe about 45%. And that means we have to get out there and talk to our members. We have to let them know how bad Lou Barletta is. That he's not Donald Trump, right? Donald Trump talked that they're bringing back jobs. Under Lou Barletta, Pennsylvania suffered some job losses, especially in his area. We've seen the opioid crisis increase. You know, there's some. These guys have a lot of things to answer for. Bad budgets that have cut Medicare and Medicaid. Cut CHIP. The guy wouldn't vote to extend CHIP coverage.
Still haven't done it.
For 9 million children, which actually started in Pennsylvania. Alan Kukovich had a bill way back in the 80s for children's health insurance, and it became the model for the national plan, and it was one of the good ideas that came out of Pennsylvania. But we got some tough races. We're going to have to organize and work hard, talk to our members. We can't assume that they're automatically going to know where people stand on issues. It's up to us to talk to them about the issues. Look, they'll make up their own minds about who they're going to vote for, but we're going to provide them with the information they need to make an intelligent choice. And when that, I think they'll pick the pro-worker candidate when it's all said and done.
Let's hope. Good stuff. Rick, I appreciate the time. Thank you so much.
Rick. Good to be on
Quick
the show.
break back here from the AFL-CIO's convention. Back after this.
Oops.
Welcome back to our coverage of the AFL-CIO convention here in St. Louis. As we talked about a little earlier, we had Will from the Union Veterans Council come over and talk about right now in the Senate, they're debating taking away vital protections for veterans through these arbitration clauses, this rip-off clause, if you will. If you remember, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, they passed some rules to protect veterans, to protect consumers against tucking in these forced arbitration clauses. Right now, the Senate is looking at taking away those protections. And as Will pointed out in a segment earlier, this is opposed by almost every veterans organization. So right now, I'm going to call Pat Toomey's office. Pat Toomey is my senator, and I'm going to say, look, Senator, I don't want you voting for it. Senator, I want no part of the rip-off clause. Vote no against the rip-off clause. Now, a lot of people have been saying, look, we're calling our senators. They're not answering the phones. We're going to find out right now live whether my senator is going to answer his phone or if it's just going to simply go to voicemail. I got to be honest, I'm anticipating the voicemail. We're calling his local office in Harrisburg, and it just seems to keep ringing and ringing and ringing. And again, I got voicemail. And it goes nowhere. There's literally nothing there. I got to thank you for calling Senator Pat Toomey's office and nothing. So again, our representatives are supposed to be representing us. How can they possibly represent us if they don't know if we're calling them or not? I'm going to look up their Washington, D.C. office, because look, at the end of the day, this is such an important issue that we have to continue to push and continue to fight and continue to let them know that, hey, what's going on is not right, and we're not going to put up with it. So we're going to give Senator Toomey's office in Washington, D.C. a call to see if they answer the phone or if I get another answering machine. It's ringing, and again, like the Harrisburg office, nothing but rings, and I'm assuming a voicemail. Now, again, we're talking about a... Hello? Yeah, I want to call and tell the senator I'd want him to vote against the legislation that they're right now debating on the arbitration and the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau's policy of not allowing veterans to get screwed over by financial institutions. How do I go about doing that? Okay. Rick Smith, 17013. All right, thank you so much. That's how easy it was. Called and told the person on the phone, I'm against it. Don't want him voting for it. I expect you to do the same thing. And look, right now, if you're in Pennsylvania, Senator Toomey's office, they answered the phone. I literally am shocked, to be honest, but it's 202-224-4254. Call early, call often, and tell them no. Do not vote for this rip-off clause. Simple. Welcome back to The Rick Smith Show. Check out our website, thericksmithshow.com. We're here at the AFL-CIO's convention, and one of the things I like to do is talk to people who are involved in, just all kinds of wonderful things throughout the labor movement, anything to get members involved. And I'm sitting here with Jay Azier. He's the president of the St. Louis chapter of the Coalition for Black Trade Unionists.
Mm-hmm.
Jay, thanks for taking time for us.
Okay, thank you. Allowing me to be on here.
I appreciate you coming, sitting down with us. Tell me, what is the Coalition for Black Trade Unionists? What do you guys do?
The Coalition of Black Trade Unionists is made up of black trade unions throughout the country. We have over 40 chapters throughout the country, including Canada. And I'm the president of the St. Louis chapter of the Coalition of Black Trade Unionists. And we've been involved in a number of issues. The Coalition of Black Trade Unions is to bridge the gap between organized labor and the black community, because many of our issues are the same.
Right.
Good job, safe working conditions, with benefits and a safe place to raise our family and live. And so, but sometimes some of the issues around race that is institutionalized in this country are not really looked at in a clear lens. And we try to help bring that to the labor community as whole. Recently, we did just, Richard Trumpkin, the president of the AFL-CIO, this past Friday, we gave him an award for some of the things that he's did and tried to move the labor forward, the work he's done in the AFL-CIO. Right. And recognizing the importance that the discussion around race is a very important question.
Well, it's important because we can't be divided.
Right.
And if we've learned from history, and if we've learned from labor's history, we've learned that any time that we can pit us against one another, the boss wins.
That's correct.
You go back to you go back to all all of our history, the fact that they were using convict lease miners in the South to break miners' unions. We were fighting each other.
Right.
We've got to stop that.
We've got to stop that.
I grew up in a housing project on the west side of Cleveland. I was the minority in that neighborhood. And I learned very, very young in life that the only color that really matters is this one right here, green. And if you're broke and I'm broke, we're all broke.
That's right.
And the only thing that we need to be doing is figuring out how we make our lives better collectively.
That's correct.
So when I look at you as the president of the CBTU, the history of your organization I find fascinating because look, you go back to A. Philip Randolph with Franklin Roosevelt, fighting for equal access to jobs, but not just that, but also a way to raise all of us up, and that I think is really important to point out.
That's a very important point, to raise us all up, because we're all in this together, and if we the more we see it in that way, the better off we can do, because all people are the same.
Yep.
They want a place They want to be productive, a place where they can raise their families, and be in a safe environment. And one of the problems that we've had, and not just here in St. Louis, but throughout the country, is in regards to the criminal justice system and the police departments. We just recently had a verdict rendered by a judge to allow a former police officer who killed a young African American, shot him numerous times, and he let him go, even though they have the police officer on videotape saying that I'm going to kill him, and within less than a minute, Lamar Smith is dead, and in the process of Jason Stockley, the police officer, broke all types of police protocol. Destruction of city property, ramming vehicles, that is not a police procedure. Shooting the officer, repeatedly going back and forth from the police vehicle to the Lamar Smith's car, and moving things, having his own personal firearm in his custody. And so it's a number of things, but go back to Trumka when Michael Brown was killed several years ago, and he was in a town about a month or two later at a state AFLCIO convention, and he spoke about the whole issue around Michael Brown. Among things that he pointed out was that Darian Wilson was a member of the police union, and Michael Brown's mother was a member of the United and Food Commercial Workers Union. So in essence, that was a brother killing his sister's son, and too often it's been happening in this country that a young black is killed by a police officer based upon the thing of making statements like that, I'm fearful. And, we got to do better than that. And we had a judge that, I'm not a lawyer, but knows that you're not to assume anything and come into a decision in the court. It should be based upon the evidence that's presented in the court. And he himself presumed, the judge presumed, that Mr. Smith had a weapon. And you cannot presume that you had no facts to verify that. The only facts that were verifiable regarding the pistol in the car was the DNA of the police officer Stockley. So in his ruling, as you call it in court, was fully flawed. But there have been a number of demonstrations that have been taking place in St. Louis, and they've continued, and will continue, because these types of atrocities need to stop. We also have the issue of right to work here in the state of Missouri, which will be on the 2018 ballot. Organized labor came together with community groups, faith-based groups, and was able to secure twice the number of signatures needed to place it on the ballot.
That's a good thing. Because I keep asking myself, how is it possible St. Louis, St. Louis, a union city, Missouri, which I always thought was a good, strong, working class state, good, strong union tradition. How is it possible that they've gone crazy? How is that possible?
Right.
And it seems like all the strong, what used to be very strong working class areas with good manufacturing bases have all lost their freaking minds.
Right.
And I come back to the fact that we've allowed business to deindustrialize, and we've created a Hunger Games situation.
Right.
To where we're all struggling, and now we've got to find victims. We've got to find people to blame.
Right.
And it's always the others.
Right.
And it's one of these things where you go, I think we're pointing at the wrong people.
Mm-hmm.
I think maybe we, instead of pointing at each other,
Right.
maybe there's somebody over there we should be pointing at.
Right, that's correct. And one of the things, that, as you said, that is that we are racing to the bottom. We got cities throughout the country. We've given all kind of tax incentive. That's for business to come in. They pay no tax, and then secure all the, what would you call it, like the infrastructure or the usage
Yeah,
of
they
the
own the
city.
stuff.
Yeah, right.
We give them the money. And this is the crazy thing. And I have friends who say, you know, public-private partnerships are great. And I go, yeah, I agree they're good if used in this manner. We take the public money, we say, private sector, we want something.
Right.
Build me a chair, build me a building. And then we own the chair and the building.
Right.
So we spent money, we had the private sector come in. The public-private part is our money, their work. We get the building, the chair, whatever. What's going on now is they take our money, they build the building, and then they own it. And I'm going, wait, how is that even sane?
Right, right. And I'm laughing, but it just you know, it's comical to the sense. It doesn't make any common sense.
But it makes sense if you're the guy owning it.
If you're the one that
Now,
owns
understand, our politics have been, you know, well, we've got the best democracy money can buy.
Right.
We've got a great Congress
Right.
if you're in the 1%.
Right.
Because they're doing everything you want them to do.
That's correct.
And this is, again, it comes down to winners and losers, and you and I were the losers.
Right, we're correct. And we want to turn that around. And part of what the coalition is about is working to turn that around, because we think that we need to be the winners. We need to back away from these types of situations that you just mentioned, where business gets everything and the community gets nothing. You know, we get the promise of jobs.
Yep.
You know.
And they never materialize.
And they never materialize.
And the ones that do aren't family sustaining wages, which again,
Right,
I
that's
come back to
another
why
question.
we have to tear down those barriers. We have to walk hand in hand, shoulder to shoulder, and fight against them instead of each other.
That's correct. That's correct. And as you're saying, that raise the wage, we've had some defeats. We've had victories, and they attempted to, they have, snatch one of our victories away. We passed in the city of St. Louis a $10 minimum wage.
Right.
And then the state legislature jumps in and
preemptively says
preemptively.
You have to cut the wages of all those people who got raises. And you go, how is it possible that you can retroactively take wages from people? Now look, Pennsylvania did it this way. Pennsylvania raised the minimum wage up to $7.15 back in 2006. But in that they passed a preemption law to go with it. There's a part of me that goes, I can understand that. We increased the minimum wage, said it can only be done at the state level. But here you guys had St. Louis who passed an increase locally because it was the law of the land.
Right.
And now the state comes in and says, no. We're gonna make you retroactively change that.
Right, that's correct.
So a worker could show up on Sunday morning working for $10 an hour at the minimum wage, but thanks to this law, thanks to the Republicans in your crazy state now, on Monday they're back to $7.25
You can take it with you. You can take it back.
I can take it with me. Look, Pennsylvania's crazy enough. I don't want to bring your crazy back to Pennsylvania.
All right.
We've got enough of our own.
Right. Yeah. Okay.
And this is where again.
And that's again, all of us, we're in the same boat.
Right.
And that we got to be willing to work together to solve the issue that helps us all. The 99%. These are the ones that we are the ones that need the help.
Absolutely.
Not a millionaire or billionaire.
We've created enough of those through our labor, through our loss of opportunity.
Right.
We've got to stick together, and that's why I appreciate you coming and talking to me and sharing some of your thoughts.
Okay, I
appreciate I appreciate it, man.
Okay, and I appreciate what you're doing and allowing me on as well as the rest that's on. And enjoy the convention, and you stay here in St. Louis, Missouri.
Good on you, man. Appreciate it. Quick break here from the convention. This is the Rick Smith Show.